Assalamu alaikum and peace be unto you. Esteemed guests and beloved supporters, welcome to the CAIR-Chicago 2021 Banquet, Reimagining Justice. Thank you for joining us for our very first virtual banquet. Bismillah. I am Dr. Aisha Elamine, and I am honored to serve as your MC for the evening. We have an amazing program planned for you tonight with an all-star lineup. We'll start the evening with the best words, the words from God, with Quranic recitation by Ismail Saeed from the Islamic Center of Naperville. In translation by Layla Ute Server from Islamic Society of Midwest.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الذين يتلون كتاب الله وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية يرجون تجارة لن تبور ليوفيهم أجورهم ويزيدهم من فضله إنه غفور شكور. والذي أوحينا إليك من الكتاب هو الحق مصدقا لما بين يديه إن الله بعباده لخبير بصير. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه ومنهم مقتصد ومنهم سابق بالخيرات بإذن الله ذلك هو الفضل الكبير. جنات عدن يدخلونها يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ولؤلؤا ولباسهم فيها حرير. وقالوا الحمد لله الذي أذهب عنا الحزن إن ربنا لغفور شكور. الذي أحلنا دار المقامة من فضله لا يمسنا فيها نصب ولا يمسنا فيها لغوب.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين يتلون كتاب الله وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية يرجون تجارة لن تبور ليوفيهم أجورهم ويزيدهم من فضله إنه غفور شكور. والذي أوحينا إليك من الكتاب هو الحق مصدقا لما بين يديه إن الله بعباده لخبير بصير. ثم أورثنا الكتاب الذين اصطفينا من عبادنا فمنهم ظالم لنفسه ومنهم مقتصد ومنهم سابق بالخيرات بإذن الله ذلك هو الفضل الكبير. جنات عدن يدخلونها يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ولؤلؤا ولباسهم فيها حرير وقالوا الحمد لله الذي أذهب عنا الحزن إن ربنا لغفور شكور الذي أحلنا دار المقامة من فضله لا يمسنا فيها نصب ولا يمسنا فيها لغوب صدق الله العظيم. I seek refuge in Allah from the outcast shaitan. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Indeed, those who recite the book of Allah and establish prayer and spend in His cause out of what we have provided them, secretly and publicly, can expect a profit that will never perish, that He may give them in full their rewards and increase for them of His bounty. Indeed, He is forgiving and appreciative. And that which we have revealed to you, O Muhammad, of the book is the truth, confirming what was before it. Indeed, Allah of His servants is acquainted and seeing. Then we cause to inherit the book those we have chosen of our servants, and among them is he who wrongs himself, and among them is he who is moderate, and among them is he who is foremost in good deeds by permission of Allah. That inheritance is what is the great bounty. For them are gardens of perpetual residence which they will enter. They will be adorned therein with bracelets of gold and pearls, and their garments therein will be silk. And they will say, Praise to Allah who has removed from us all sorrow. Indeed, our Lord is forgiving and appreciative. He who has settled us in the home of duration out of His bounty, there touches us not in its any fatigue, and there touches us not in its weariness of mind. Allah Almighty speaks the truth.
MashaAllah. Thank you, Brother Ismail and Sister Layla, for the beautiful recitation. So as many of you know, CAIR-Chicago is a 501c3 not-for-profit Muslim civil rights organization registered independently in Illinois. CAIR is the nation's largest civil rights and advocacy group. Though it leverages the resources, expertise, and knowledge base of CAIR based in Washington, CAIR-Chicago functions as an independent organization that sets its own strategy and goals. We work to maintain equal opportunity for and normalize the image of Muslims in America. With the mission to defend civil rights, fight bigotry, and promote tolerance, our Civil Rights Department provides pro bono legal services to Muslims who have faced discrimination, and as a result of their race, religion, or ethnicity. Our primary mandate is to promote and defend the constitutional rights of all Americans and to assist those who cannot attain justice themselves. I proudly serve as a board member of CAIR-Chicago, and I have for the last 7 years. But long before I was a board member, I was a client. My first encounter with CAIR-Chicago was as a student over 15 years ago. I know, I look way too young to have been a student 15 years ago, but you know. I walked into the student ID office and was told that I would not have my picture taken until I, quote, took that thing off my head. When I told them I wore a hijab for religious reasons, they continued to refuse to take my picture. After assuring me they knew what Muslims look like, and it was not like that. So as a frustrated and extremely livid cash income absent student, I turned to CAIR-Chicago for help. They educated them, and I think scared them a bit too, which gave me a little bit of joy, I must admit. But most importantly, they ensured my rights as a Black Muslim girl from the South Side of Chicago were protected. At CAIR-Chicago, our cases include racial profiling, harassment and bullying in schools and workplaces, citizenship delays, police misconduct, prisoners' rights, and workplace discrimination. We are committed to upholding equality and combating discrimination of all forms through negotiation, litigation, education, and awareness. We offer political empowerment to community members so they can understand and utilize the political system to work for them instead of against them. Our projects include voter registration drives, community workshops, know your rights, educational campaigns, and trainings for masjids and Muslim centers. CAIR-Chicago also monitors the local media closely to flag for bias against Muslims and responds accordingly. We do not do this work alone. We forge mutually beneficial partnerships with local and national institutions whose activities overlap with CAIR-Chicago's in order to maximize our efficiency. We work to empower the Muslim community and to foster an understanding between Chicago's Muslim and non-Muslim communities through public education and to serve the needs of the Chicagoland community through public service. Since we launched January 5th, 2005, our commitment to defend the rights of our community has never wavered. We are proud of all of our communities and look forward to continuing building beautiful, meaningful relationships and advocating against hate and discrimination in all of its forms. Tonight we have planned a riveting virtual banquet with our distinguished elected officials and highly anticipated keynote addresses by Imam Khalid Latif and Dr. Dalia Fahmy. We ask for your support this evening. If you are watching on our website, CAIRChicago.org, you can see the donation form on the same page, along with our full program, sponsors, speakers' bios, and our annual report. Please feel free to send your donation or pledges throughout the evening. You can donate directly on our website, CAIRChicago.org, or text your pledge amount to the number below my screen. If you're watching on Facebook, hey Facebookers, you can also donate there. We hope that our program this evening is both informative and inspiring as we reimagine justice together. I want to thank some organizations that are on the front lines of doing so, our bronze and silver sponsors. Our silver sponsors this evening are MPI Media Group, the Prayer Center of Orland Park, AMCO, Muslim Community Center, Islamic Center of Wheaton, Ileana Islamic Association, and a thank you to our bronze sponsors, Universal School, Saba, Peter N., Hughes Sokol Piers Resnick Dim Ltd, Islamic Center of Des Plaines, Fawaz Kunutz Montara, Amana Mutual Funds, Iman Fund, Alwayne Printing, Pediatric Health Associates, and last but certainly not least, Infinity Creatives. We thank you. We'll now go into a brief documentary.
What's in an organization? Its name, its mission, the legacy upon which it stands, the youth that is its future, the persistent path it takes, the diversity of its representation, the people it is dedicated to serve, the consistency over the years, the values upon which it stands. For CAIR-Chicago, it is all of the above. So what is it that defines CAIR-Chicago? Giving our best. Being there for those who demand fairness, with our hearts, our heads, and our hands, for the most vulnerable among us. No sister, no brother left behind. And what is in a community? The offspring of wisdom, a history of courage, its passion, its organizing, its activism, its identity, its giving, its collaboration, its solidarity, leadership that inspires, a faith that binds, trailblazing without changing despite the odds. For the American Muslim community, it is all of the above. And what's in you? Everything worth fighting for.
Beautiful. That video gave me chills. I have the complete honor to introduce you to our fierce leader who you just heard on that documentary, the executive director of CAIR-Chicago, Ahmed Rehab. Instead of reading his bio, which tells you about his numerous accomplishments and his impressive qualifications, which of course you can find on our website or even with a quick Google search, I want to instead take a moment to thank our beloved brother, Ahmed. He is one of the hardest working justice fighters I know. He is relentless in ensuring the civil rights of every Muslim in Chicago. He values diversity. And he's not in that perfunctory way that stops at lip service, because somehow saying Black Lives Matter has now moved out of the Black-only discourse into the politically acceptable lexicon. His values are evidenced by the work he engages in and how he engages it, the interns he attracts, the team he hires, the board that serves the organization. For me, our board chairman, Dr. Kadami, and my fellow board members, we thank you for your leadership, your unwavering and unapologetic civil rights advocacy, and your organizational skills, which ensured even in the virtual banquet space that we all had the traditional matching scarves, your impeccable fiscal responsibility, or how we used to say while playing double dutch, your ability to make $1 out of 15 cents. And the Chicago Muslim community is indebted to you and the groundbreaking work you lead at CAIR-Chicago. I thank you, and I pass the mic to you, our executive director.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aisha. I really appreciate those very kind words. When I asked you not to read a bio, I did not expect this in its place. But nonetheless, it is an honor to serve with you in this great organization and everybody else on the board, and in the staff and the interns and the volunteers, because truly this is an organization of so many different people who work together to ensure that justice is served each and every time that someone is suffering an injustice. And it is an honor to be part of that movement. I want to begin by welcoming everybody once again. This is a very unusual setting that we are in. It is for me. I did not expect for a moment last year at this time, when we had our banquet in Drury Lane, as always, in Oak Brook, that this year, this time around, I would be here in my home office with my wife and kids at a friend's house to ensure that nobody opens that door and walks in as they normally do when I'm on a Zoom call. But these are the times we're in with the COVID pandemic that has brought a lot of changes to our lives, that has brought, unfortunately, darkness to some corners, with some sadness going on in some families, losing loved ones, the difficulty of finding or keeping jobs, the economic situation. All of that has really changed the way we do things means that we need to change how we respond to the demands. And so, for example, we were forced to go remote. And one thing we had to do, and luckily over the years, this is now a test of our mettle, we had systemized our systems to such a degree that this transition was relatively seamless to be able to continue to serve every client, respond to every media situation, be at the front lines of any of the public narratives from our new remote locations because of our back end systems. We don't normally talk about back end, we talk about front end. But I'm always a believer in the importance of professional Muslim activism, meaning that if our front end is going to look good, the back end needs to be as robust as possible. So I'm very thankful to everybody on the team who helped make that possible. In this difficult year, we also saw civil unrest with the Black Lives Matter movement coming more to fruition as a result of, unfortunately, the continued police brutality that we see in our streets. And CAIR-Chicago working within coalitions, and it is important to note that where we don't lead, we step up to back up, and you can always lead from behind and support your allies and coalitions. This year, or last year rather, was an election year. We had an election portal that was a resource. We had services for our community to ensure that our civic engagement, one of our greatest and most sacred civil rights, was practiced by everyone who could practice it. We worked with the Illinois Civil Coalition, Muslim Civil Coalition. We worked with CAIR-GC, our partners, to ensure that we got out maximum vote. And for the census last year as well, to be counted. Every single family matters and must be counted. And within all of these changes, all of this tempest of change, we have to continue to do the work that is sometimes thankless, but is the bread and butter of what we do. Sufyan Sohail, who'll be speaking to you shortly, our civil rights, one of our civil rights attorneys, my deputy director, our great litigation partner, is someone who is stepping up every moment to answer these calls, including in the middle of the night, to ensure that those travelers had legal advice, that he can assist them where possible. And with the situation in Yemen, there were hundreds of calls coming in every month, thousands over the year. We continued with our civil rights cases that involved employment discrimination, that involved airport discrimination and travel in general, that involved workplace and housing, that involved things that happen in a marketplace or in a restaurant. And anybody who is a Muslim and is targeted simply and only because they are Muslim is someone that in the past had a difficult situation to deal, a dilemma. Do they go and hire an attorney and pay tens of thousands of dollars potentially in order to ensure that their dignity and their rights are retained? Do they let it go and let it just burn them deep underneath? What do they do with a situation like this? It was necessary that we built a backbone to this community so that these things, every time they happen, are responded to. That these individuals, our brothers and sisters, who are targeted for no fault of their own, simply their identity, simply living out loud who they are, which is a right of every human being, a human right as well as a civil right, are put down, are discriminated against, are turned away, are made to feel less, and then to have to settle for that? Absolutely not. With your support, and this is really about you, the work that we do cannot be done without you being in our back. You are leading from behind as far as CAIR-Chicago is concerned and the work that we do. And we're able to provide a mechanism free of charge for all of these victims of these either hate crimes, civil rights violations, or acts of discrimination to be able to pursue justice to the full extent of the law, whether it is in the court systems, in the public domain, or elsewhere. We can do this through mediation or arbitration or litigation, it doesn't matter, but what matters is that where there is a need for justice, we can rise up together and ensure that it is served. So I want to take a moment to thank everybody who's out there right now, who's watching us, whether you've supported in the past or will support tonight or simply are giving us your dua. We honestly cannot do this work without you. And before I turn it over to my dear brother and friend, Imam Sheikh Kifah Mustafa of the Olin Park Prayer Center, who has been with us, by the way, since day one, along with many of our great imams like Sheikh Jamal Saeed of the Mosque Foundation and others. When I say that we can't do this work alone, I'm thinking of people like him. He is a spiritual advisor, but he's also a civil rights leader, as far as I'm concerned. We cannot work without these imams and these partners and other organizations relaying the message, helping people know their rights, giving us access to their communities, coming to help us in nights like tonight in order to gain and garner support from the public. And before I turn it over to him, I just want to say one more thing. We saw recently the dark and crazy moments that our country went through as our nation's capital was stormed by supporters of President Trump. And we saw how flimsy this democracy can really be. That a sitting president, this isn't some nutcase who has no power on a blog, and there are many, but this is someone who has rose to the highest levels of public office. And while in that office, has incited essentially an insurrection against our democracy because he was not happy with the results, the fair and public results of this election. And we saw the fact that while it was a small number of individuals, they were willing to go far, and that behind this sentiment of extremism and radicalization, now we're asking who's radicalizing and where were they radicalized and where's the FBI? These are valid questions. There are 70 plus million people who supported this individual. We have work to do in this country. It's not about who you choose to support. It's about the mentality of why you do it. Many did it for the right reasons in their minds, but many others supported the same mentality of white nationalism and populism that I'll be talking about in the program a little later, a little bit more. But before I turn it over, I just want to say that as American Muslims, we are proud through these organizations to be serving the robustness of democracy through upholding our civil rights. That is one of the great privileges of having a democracy, is enshrining the civil rights of all citizens. With that, I'll turn it over to my dear brother and Imam, Sheikh Kifah Mustafa.
Jazakallah khair, Akhi Ahmed. May Allah reward you for all the great job that you do on a personal level, but also the whole team with you at CAIR-Chicago. We are proud of you as a community here in Chicago. Let me start by asking everyone who is joining us if you can just do us a favor and click on the share button. Because if you do that, you give a chance for other people to watch and be updated on an important topic, that justice is being served, justice is being protected. This is something we need to think about it ourselves. Maybe you might not be able to donate something on your own, but if you share it and someone else listens and benefits from and donates $1 or $1,000, it will be in your book of Hasanat. For the Prophet said, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one who shows for the good deed, Allah will reward him the same. Let me start by saying the importance of giving tonight for this program is not just for one reason, but I will speak of three, and I'll be coming back throughout the program. I'm just going to be talking for a couple of minutes here. When you remember the very famous hadith, probably that we all love and we all memorize, that among the 7 people that God will shield at the day of judgment by his might, subhanahu wa ta'ala, he began sallallahu by saying imamun adil, someone who is in the post of a leadership and serves justice. And what we are expecting to come, even with Biden taking the administration, there is a lot of people who will come back after that. It's not going to be an easy ride the next 4 years. It's going to be a lot of people who might think that presidency has been taken out from them, that they're going to come back and retaliate. And retaliate against whom? Probably minorities, probably people of different ethnicities. And they're going to be looking at those who might be the weak part in that. And of course, Muslims are in that category. So it is an important that when you give this amount tonight and support CAIR's work, you are supporting justice. That is a theme under the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-adl. It is not just being contributing an amount of money. Many people donate to their masajid to build a mosque. Many people donate to sponsor an orphan. But I believe that supporting justice as a concept is supporting the idea of your existence under the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And CAIR is doing that. So if you are listening to us, can you give tonight a pledge? And you don't have to pay it all at once, $1,000. a monthly pledge of $100, a monthly pledge of $50, a monthly pledge of $200, whatever you can afford, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you to give, do not hesitate and make sure that you give this, because it is the part that has to do with the concept of justice. But let me talk about the two reasons that I told you I will be talking about too. The second point is that when you give, you are assuring yourself of your true faith and believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Giving is a concept that is in us as an ethical value embedded in each one of us. The concept of giving, al-ata fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, makes you feel that you have won yourself. You have owned yourself. Money is not controlling you. You are controlling your wealth and you are in charge. And then you are choosing that the best place to give it is something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the idea of the rewards that Allah will give you back at the day of judgment. Most of the good deeds that the Quran spoke about, Man ja'a bil hasanati falahu ashru amthaliha. Probably many of you remember this hadith, that if you do a good deed, Allah will reward you 10 times. If you make a tasbih or a dhikr, Allah will multiply it 10 times for you, except for sadaqah, except for donations, except for money given for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And probably for those who started with us, by the beautiful two reciters, the sister and the brother, when they spoke about مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ, it is a spike of, wheat that is multiplied, 7 times, into 100 times, into multiplications, because that's how money come back to you. So if you are giving $1,000 tonight, pledge it for this year, $100 a month for the next 10 months to come, or $80, $83 a month for the next 12, months to come. You are giving yourself a level of multiplicity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one knows about it. Because at the end of that ayah, what did Allah say? Wallahu yudha'ifu liman yasha. After he spoke about numbers, Allah added that he will multiply to whomever he wishes. And then he finished with two attributes and names of him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu wasi'un alim. Allah indeed is the most spacious in generosity when it talks about rewarding people back. And he knows the idea of giving. And the third point that I want to share with you about the concept of giving fi sabilillah. Maybe you want to customize and say, okay, this is what they're asking me for tonight. Can I pledge $10,000? Can I pledge $5,000? Can I put $1,000? This is what we might need as an organization, as CAIR. They might have tell you, this is our budget. Go to their website and you will see, the financial report. And, probably we need $1 million this year, or $500,000, the next year. And you might say, okay, I'm going to give this much. But is that really what do you want to give? Only what they need? Don't you want to ask yourself, what do you need? Because if they need that money to help serve people who are in need, you need this service to get yourself into heaven and in paradise, inshallah ta'ala. You are the one, in reality, more desperate for the good deed to be available to you, to be able to share and contribute this blessing that Allah has given to you, to give it fi sabilillah. And I just want to share, a small story about that. One of the greatest scholars in our history, his name is Al-Layth ibn Sa'd, rahimahullah. He used to be also in business, and he had a ship, loading some barrels of honey for him. An old woman came with a small container asking for some honey, and he said, I don't have honey for you now. When she walked away, he told one of his servants or, workers, employees, follow her with a whole barrel of honey. He said, oh, Imam, she asked you a fill of a small container, and that would have been sufficient for her in fill of what her need is. Why sending her a whole barrel to her house? He said, she asked us in relation to her need, but we shall give her in relation to our need for the mercy of Allah. So I want to leave you with this thought. Don't give just because how much CAIR needs from you tonight, $100 or $50 or $1,000 or whatever it is. Give in the idea and intention. What is that you need from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? This money, the more you give it, the more sincerity you have in it, Allah will give you more. And it will be in relation to what will be found a gift to CAIR, but it is actually gifting yourself. I will be back with you, inshallah ta'ala, in a few moments. Let me bring it back to Brother Akhuna Ahmad Rihab, and he will continue with you on the program, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Kifah Mustafa. Thank you so much for your support. And everybody else, thank you for donating. We can see donations start to come in. If you are unable to donate tonight or want to donate later, you can text your pledge amount and name to the number that is below this screen. You can donate right now on our website, CAIR-Chicago.org, if you're not already on it. If you are on it, you'll be able to watch the program. You'll be able to see the program itinerary below the video, a goal bar that you can refresh to see live, as well as a donate form, as I mentioned. There's also a Facebook feed and a YouTube feed. With that, I'll be back as well in a little while in the program. I'll turn it back to my sister, Dr. Aisha Alamin.
Thank you. Thank you both. It's really something to hear about all of the great work and to be reminded where these donations are going and what they're doing to serve justice. I am pleased to introduce our next speaker, Illinois Governor Jb Pritzker. He's a descendant of refugees and believes our state and our nation should welcome and protect its immigrant families, and that we must fight against the wave of intolerance that has risen in the recent years. He has stood firm on his belief of equity and inclusion by building the most diverse cabinet and governor's office in Illinois history. And we welcome him to CAIR-Chicago Banquet.
Hi, this is Governor Jb Pritzker, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to the CAIR-Chicago's first virtual banquet and 17th annual event. Like you, I'm committed to defending civil rights and fighting Islamophobia and bigotry against all. Hate has no place in Illinois. This past year, the pandemic has been a challenge for us all. But our partnership with the Muslim community for many of our initiatives has helped protect and empower our people. Together, we're working to safeguard our families against the dangers that plague us, be it a virus and contagion or discrimination and hate. Here in Illinois, our cultural roots stem from every corner of the earth, and I'm proud to serve a state that celebrates so much diversity. Giving people of the Muslim community a protected and proud space to embrace traditions and preserve inalienable liberties is a goal I share with all of you. Tonight's theme, Reimagining Justice, highlights the need to ensure that everyone is truly treated with the dignity that we all deserve. I pledge to continue to stand by our common efforts to defend the rights of religious minorities and promote equality and equal opportunity for all.
Thank you, Governor Pritzker. We appreciate your pledge and we applaud your continued advocacy. Next, I have the pleasure, we're going from state to city. I have the pleasure of introducing our Chicago mayor, Mayor Laurie Lightfoot. She's Chicago's first African-American female mayor, and ran on a platform that completely aligns with CAIR-Chicago of fairness and inclusion, with a commitment to creating opportunity for every Chicagoan, regardless of any distinctions. She has shown this commitment in numerous ways. One way is evidenced in her creation of the Racial Equity Rapid Response Team. I am so honored to welcome you, Mayor Lightfoot.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mayor Laurie Lightfoot. This past year has been one for the history books. For all the challenges that marked 2020, the issues we confronted at their core were generational and rooted in the deep inequities and social injustices of our society. Whether in the righteous protests we saw in our streets over the summer, or in the outrageously disproportionate impact COVID-19 continues to have on our vulnerable communities, and particularly communities of color. For over a decade now, CAIR-Chicago has been at the forefront in the fight for equity and justice through handling thousands of civil rights complaints, along with media campaigns, advocacy, education, training, and empowerment. Now, as we stand at the cusp of this new year, I want you to know that your mission to reimagine justice has not only a voice in City Hall, but a partner and passionate advocate. Thank you all. Please keep up the great work and continue to stay safe.
Thank you, Mayor Lightfoot, for your partnership and your continued advocacy. We certainly do appreciate it. Next, I am pleased to announce and hear from the United States Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin serves as a Democratic whip, the second highest ranking position among the Senate Democrats. Senator Durbin has been elected to his leadership post by his Democratic colleagues every 2 years since 2005. Now, remember, I told you 2005 is when CAIR-Chicago started. And Senator Durbin is also an old friend of CAIR-Chicago. In fact, he spoke at our banquet in 2018 when virtual was not even a thing. So we welcome him back for a few words, followed by some words from our clients.
Hi, this is Senator Dick Durbin. I'm glad I could join you today. I know this isn't exactly how we expected to be having a banquet this year, but it's a good time to reflect on the year we've been through and our hard work that lies ahead. I want to thank CAIR-Chicago and the Muslim community for all of the work you do to protect civil rights in our city, our state, and our nation. This pandemic has brought out the best in people, and it's brought out the worst. It's been especially hard on communities of color. As the virus has spread, so have acts of racism and xenophobia. But CAIR-Chicago has been on the ground working to empower and help communities through this pandemic. CAIR has spent the last 4 years fighting Muslim bans, supporting nationwide protest, peaceful protest, advocating for a fair census, and helping to get out the vote in the election. Thanks to those efforts, we will soon welcome the Biden-Harris administration and a Democratic majority in both the House and the Senate. Together, we can enact policies that make America a more welcoming, just, and equitable place. Thank you for having the courage to stand up against hate and to stand up for the values that have made this nation great. I'm proud to stand with you.
So I'm Mohammed Hassan. I'm a PhD candidate at Northwestern. Usually because I'm using libraries a lot, I just pray in public spaces freely, and I haven't experienced any problems with that. But this time, in a certain library location, security personnel came approaching me, but this time was so close, intrusive. Tried to stop me from praying. I got stunted when she told me I'm gonna call the police. I told her the police for a prayer. I was thinking why this could happen in Chicago and in a public library. I posted on Facebook and I quoted CAIR. They were following up with me immediately, supported me emotionally, and I was worried that anybody else could experience something like this if they are trying to practice their religion in public or practice their beliefs. But knowing that CAIR could communicate with the officials in the Chicago Public Library and offering some kind of training or support to their staff to be more culturally sensitive and to educate them about diversity, that was really something I appreciate, and I think it will, push the culture forward in Chicago. Chicago is really welcoming, and we want to keep it as is.
My name is Dima Ali. I am Iraqi American, and I am Muslim. And I live in Oak Park for 10 years now. Last month, I used my freedom of speech and I commented on a post, on a Facebook post. Even any person in America, I have opinions. My opinions sometimes are strong, and my opinion sometimes doesn't sit well with white people. And I called somebody out because I believed he is a white supremacist, and I called him out, just like anybody. That person happened to be an elected official. He took the pleasure to screenshot my name, dox me, post on his own page, and blow his whistle. So I was distraught and I was upset, and I felt helpless, really. But then somebody connected me with Mr. Tamer Abu Zaid, who introduced himself as a CAIR lawyer, and he was more than happy to help me. And immediately after he got in the picture and he was involved, magically things happened. They gave me the time I want. They were apologetic. They listened because they knew I have people behind me. I am forever grateful for CAIR-Chicago. I know about the mission, and I always donate and all, but when I needed somebody to help me, somebody stepped in immediately and offered that help and offered the support. And it feels so good when I know I have people, when I know somebody got my back. And these people are my people, are like me. They're not gonna judge me. They're not gonna silence me. A person who speaks like me, a person who looks like me, a person who has a faith like my faith. And for that, I am forever grateful.
Thank you so much. Okay, that might have been the line of the night. I just could not stop laughing, Sister Ali. Some things I say just don't sit well with white people. That was great. Remember that you can continue to donate. This is the work that we're doing. CAIR-Chicago, as you can imagine, has been extremely busy this past year, advocating for and protecting the civil rights of our community. The backbone of our organization has been an amazing legal team who has been busy litigating, educating, advocating, and working tirelessly on the hundreds of cases received by our office. Up next is our three attorneys: Deputy Director and Counsel, Sofyan Sohail; Litigation Director, Bill Robertson; and the newest addition to the CAIR-Chicago family, Staff Attorney, Tamer Abu Zaid.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. I'm so glad that after 10 months, I have an occasion tonight to wear a tie. I'm even more excited to have you all join us tonight. For me, for CAIR-Chicago, probably for so many of us, 2020 was a year that really illustrated the huge racial and socioeconomic disparities that separated so many of our communities. Early in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw an increase in anti-Asian rhetoric and violence. We had thousands of our constituents stuck in foreign countries due to COVID travel restrictions, most in the Middle East and Asia, with the US government doing very little or nothing to support them in coming home. The murder of George Floyd reignited our fears and moved so many of us to change, to support other communities facing oppression and injustice. We questioned law enforcement and their use of violence, and we examined our own biases, our relationships with other vulnerable communities, and our homes and Zoom calls were filled with the discussions on topics of racism, tokenism, allyship, and equity. I know my own family is probably tired of hearing me lecture them on social justice issues, but remind them that we are here in this country not only due to our own perseverance and hard work, but to the efforts and struggles of so many communities before us. And we must not be idle. Your team at CAIR-Chicago has worked around the clock, and we continue to fight for justice on your behalf. We helped over 1,000 Americans who were stuck abroad due to COVID, stuck in Yemen and in India and in Egypt. We helped them safely return home. Our Travelers Assistance Project, which Ahmed talked about briefly, more commonly known as TAP, has a 24-hour-a-day, 7 days a week hotline that rings and is answered by our team all day and all night. Not a single week has passed that Chicagoans, and not only Muslims, have contacted us and seeking travel guidance or help in navigating Muslim ban-related travel issues, and that we were able to help them or provide answers for them or support them. We're supporting community partners in passing city resolutions condemning hate in India and other parts of the world, and working alongside activists and partner organizations to hold the city and Chicago Police Department accountable to the diverse populations that it serves, both in lieu of police violence, as well as bigoted rhetoric made by CPD leadership. And our civil rights caseload has been filled as our phones keep ringing, as you, our constituency, continues to call us seeking legal advice after facing hate and injustice. It's been a year, and the insurrection in our nation's capital almost 2 weeks ago has left so many of us demoralized, anxious, and afraid. But we have hope. with the promise of the Biden administration signaling change and promise of canceling of many of the horrible policies enacted by his predecessor, things look bright. But we must remain vigilant. And my promise, our promise, is that we will continue to advocate and fight on your behalf to make sure that all of our rights are protected. Tonight, I'm also honored to have with me my colleagues, CAIR-Chicago Litigation Director Philip Robertson and CAIR-Chicago Staff Attorney Tamara Bezed, who are going to share a little bit more about the work that we've been doing this past year. Phil, if we can have you start off talking about the different types of cases we've seen, new trends that may have come through our office, I think that would be a good way to kick off.
Thank you, Sufyan. When I look back at 2020, what strikes me is the subtle shift of focus in our caseload from cases involving private companies and individuals to those involving the government. We still had a strong contingent of employment discrimination cases that involved private businesses of all sizes, but we also had a high number of immigration cases due to delays by the federal government in processing applications, particularly citizenship, employment card, and asylum applications. In fact, many of the calls we receive on a daily basis from the Chicagoland Muslim community involve immigration issues, some simple, some complex. The delays have been getting so bad lately that we had to file a lawsuit against the federal government on behalf of 7 asylum applicants from our Muslim community. Many of them had been waiting years since they applied for asylum or were interviewed. It took CAIR-Chicago's legal intervention to get these applications moving in the system again. Aside from immigration, government discrimination took over a large portion of our intake work in 2020. We had many members of our community complain about hate crimes of which they were the victims, but we also heard their complaints about a lack of investigation of those crimes by local police. We heard complaints from community members about discrimination by government agencies, federal, state, and local, that were ignoring them or were outright hostile to the Muslim community. We saw a spike in complaints about law enforcement contacts before and leading up to the election, specifically FBI contacts, and we were there for those members when they needed to meet with those agents. Not surprisingly, due to the pandemic, we didn't see as many cases involving schools or travel as we had in previous years, but we still aggressively investigated and pursued those cases in 2020, especially those involving bullying and cyberbullying. We worked with our partner chapter in Washington, D.C. to assist those who have been repeatedly stopped while traveling become members of a class action lawsuit challenging the no-fly list as unconstitutional. We also worked in coordination with our partner organizations to continue the legal and policy battle against the unconstitutional Muslim ban. What I found most amazing, though, was how diverse our caseload became in 2020. There were many intakes in 2020 that covered areas to which we had not been exposed before, but which we were being called upon to act on. We received intakes that came from unusual industries, unusual locations, and unusual life circumstances. The fact that these were new or novel areas for discrimination to breed in did not deter us from investigating them or pursuing them as necessary on behalf of the Muslim community. At first blush, they may have seemed to be beyond our scope or our mission, but upon a closer look, there was often the opportunity to make a difference in the community. So we took on those cases as well. Frequently, they exposed areas which were in dire need of reform, such as police training.
Thank you, Phil. Tamara, we saw our communities face several inequities due to COVID and events this past year. Can you share a little bit what we saw in our office's response?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sufyan, and welcome everybody. Yeah, I think the two most glaring examples of inequities started the year with COVID and with the kind of response that the Asian American and Asian communities suffered in the United States. The closest thing I can compare it to was how Muslims were viewed after 9/11. People suddenly became suspicious of you. They left you hateful notes. Some people were assaulted, all because they looked a certain way. And one of the things we did was we partnered up with a couple of organizations, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago and Hollaback, which does a lot of training about stopping harassment. And a few of us took a course on bystander intervention, and we now teach that course to other people. And basically it teaches people how to intervene safely and effectively if you witness harassment yourself. So anyone out there who belongs to an organization or who leads an organization and you'd like that training offered to your organization, please give us a call or send us an email and we can get it done. And it's free of charge. You don't have to pay anything, but you should still donate, of course. I think the second biggest, second in the time frame is policing and how it affects, of course, certain communities over others. Black people, Latinx people, people with mental illness, people who have disabilities, people experiencing homelessness, transgender people, all these people are especially affected by policing. And one of the things that we did is work very closely with our allies and organizations. And we are right now working on legislation, an ordinance that is pending in City Council in Chicago to pass a Civilian Police Accountability Council, which would be an agency that would give the community control of its police forces in terms of deciding policy, hiring and firing key personnel, negotiating contracts, setting a budget, all that stuff, so that people elect civilians, especially for that job, and they can control who polices them and how they are policed.
Thank you, Tamir. Phil, share a little bit with us about some of the specific cases that we've worked on, some of the most meaningful cases that we heard from this year.
As part of its mission, CAIR-Chicago looks to assist not only individual clients with their cases, but we also look to address trends that may be affecting the Chicago Muslim community as a whole. 2020 was no different in that respect. For example, CAIR took on the federal government when it imposed the Muslim ban by working with its partner organizations and fellow chapters in filing a federal lawsuit against the Trump administration. In 2020, we also continued our fight with the federal agency which handles immigration by pursuing the claims of 7 Muslim asylum applicants whose applications were hung up in the system and had not been processed for years. Through our efforts in federal court, we were able to get those applications moving again. Closer to home, there were many issues that needed our attention. One that was of particular importance in the state of Illinois involved a form being used by the Illinois Secretary of State for people who wish to wear religious headwear when getting their pictures taken for a state ID or a driver's license. The form not only asked for a declaration about the sincerity of one's religious beliefs, but also warned that if the form was signed and then the individual was seen publicly not wearing the religious headwear for whatever reasons, their license could be suspended. We filed a lawsuit in federal court alleging that the form was an unconstitutional infringement on the religious freedom of Muslims, many of whom wear such headwear because of their sincerely held religious beliefs and would prefer to be photographed that way. As a result of the lawsuit, and in conjunction with our partners in the Sikh community, we were able to work with the Secretary of State's office to amend the language in the form so it no longer included the threat of license suspension and simply requested only that the headwear was being worn as part of the individual's sincerely held religious observance. The revised form is now being used throughout the state of Illinois. Another area in which we became more active was the Illinois prison system. In 2020, we joined the fight for halal food, including Zabiya prepared meat, for all Muslim inmates in the state's correctional system. Currently, if a Muslim inmate wishes to have such a diet while incarcerated, he can make a request to the institution. However, the Illinois Department of Corrections has a strict statewide policy that prohibits this option from being provided to any inmates, regardless of their religious beliefs. So all such requests were being denied across the state. We are currently handling the case of an inmate who made such a request and was denied by the Department of Corrections. The federal lawsuit challenges the blanket denial as an unconstitutional deprivation of his First Amendment rights to freely practice his religion while in prison. We filed a motion arguing such to the court, and the motion is presently under the court's consideration. If successful, it would mean that Muslim inmates throughout the state will be able to request and be provided a halal diet.
Thank you, Phil. Tamer, hate comes in so many different forms, and we see it in almost every venue, especially online. We recently just heard from Dima Ali, but can you talk a little bit more about that case, please? And how that, how individuals are reaching out to us and what steps we're taking as an organization then to make sure they get the justice that they deserve.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dima, is from Oak Park. Oak Park is known as a pretty liberal town. You walk around there, there's lots of signs that say hate has no home here. But unfortunately, we know that Islamophobia can creep up anywhere. And part of what we do is monitor the media. So when Miss Ali made a comment on the Wednesday Journal, which is a local Oak Park newspaper, and things started happening, we heard about it, and I actually proactively reached out to some friends who we had in common. I hadn't met her before. And it was really about this. An elected official thought that it was safe to use Muslims as a punching bag. And he was mistaken. We responded quickly. We reached out to the Board of Education where he served. And despite the fact that they were ignoring Ms. Ali previously, they immediately allowed her a time to talk. They offered an unequivocal apology. They unequivocally condemned this board member's Islamophobic rhetoric, literally calling it Islamophobic, because he wrote things like, what she did was something, was a form of terrorism. He said, if you see something, will you say something? He used an example of someone dropping a bag somewhere and in a crowd and running away, right? Really using these Islamophobic tropes. And so we did it. We got her the time she needed. We got her an apology, and we are now working with the Board of Education to make sure that there's better training. And, she was so happy with what happened that she ended up actually doing a fundraiser on Facebook and raising $2,500 for us. And that wasn't a way to pay us for our services. Obviously, our services are free of charge, but that was a way for her to pay it forward, because she knows that things happen, and the next person this happens to has to have an organization like ours behind them who can support them and back them up. And so I ask everyone to please pay it forward. You don't know if it's going to happen to you or somebody else, but we know that it will happen. And we take, it's an honor to us to be able to support our community. With your support.
Thanks, Tamer, and thanks for that. I completely echo with you that it's one of my biggest honors in my life to do this work, but we cannot do it without the community support. So thank you both for sharing more about the work that we do. And I'm so thankful. I know Ahmed and our entire team is so thankful to have you two and our large team of law clerks supporting the hundreds of cases that we see every year. Up next, we'll be hearing again from Ahmed and Sheikh Kifa. But before they return, we have a short little video that we'd like to share with you about our work. Thank you.
There is an Islamic invasion into our government offices right now, okay? You saw after midterm elections, we saw so many Muslims elected. I don't know the exact number, but there were quite a few. We had that woman out of Minnesota. Now she's going into Congress and she's got to wear a head covering. They want to put their hand on the Quran and be sworn in. No, you have to be sworn in on the Bible. But we have an Islamic invasion into our government offices.
Here's the thing. Islamophobia is out there, and there are those who spend billions to keep us from being equal, from fulfilling our full potential. But we have something to say about that. There are some things that you and I can do on our own individually, but combating systemic racism, bigotry, discrimination, and supremacy requires that we work together in an equally systemic, equally persistent, professional and dedicated way, day in, day out. Whenever our faith is targeted by those who wish us harm, we have to be capable of responding. There might be those who think it's open season on Islam and Muslims, but they have another thing coming. This community stood behind us to build a backbone that can rise to every occasion, to defend the rights of those who are targeted, not once, not twice, but every single day. A movement, a beehive, a lasting change that will, with the will of God, protect our liberties for generations to come. We will work to defeat bigotry in the elite and in the street, in the courts, and yes, in Congress. We will write our own story, and we will build the narratives that define us.
Come and work together, because it is one thing for us to be able to do whatever we can on our own time. We have a lot of intelligent people, a lot of capable people, a lot of generous people. We can stand up for what's right, and we do, many of us, in our individual capacity. But let's be honest, if we want to make a difference on a wider scale, we have to organize. We have to build organizations. Why? Because if you and I individually can do something on Tuesday, we might not be available next Friday or 2 months from now. We need an organization that can be available and ready to go every single day in, day out, 24/7 if needed. We need a committed, dedicated effort for any problem that we have in our society. If we're dealing with poverty, if we're dealing with violence, if we're dealing with environmental issues, if we're dealing with illiteracy, if we're dealing with civil rights abuse and hate and bigotry, we need an organized, dedicated organization, entity, to continue to do this work day in, day out on our behalf. Because I'll tell you what, Islamophobes, they don't take a break. Sheldon Adelson, who passed away recently, one of the largest donors for the Trump campaign, is also one of the largest funders, along with the Mercer family and many other well-known individuals, billionaires, many of them, of the Islamophobia organized network, as I call it. You see, Islamophobia, we can talk about two things. They're interrelated, but you have the sort of knee-jerk racism that exists out of ignorance, out of spite, out of someone being disgruntled and angry and dark inside. And you have those who know better. They're super educated, they're well off, they've seen the world, they know who Muslims are, what Muslims are about. They don't misunderstand where we stand on issues, but they purposefully attempt to smear and tarnish our community because they believe that it is in their political or religious interests to do so. And I said they're interrelated. The latter group feeds into the former. So they incite the former with blogs and ads, political ads if necessary, with articles, with funding to have their own hate groups and hate ideas and ideologies. And a lot of this stuff is organic, but a lot of it is engineered. And when you're looking at the organic and the engineered, it is in the billions of dollars. There have been reports about this. Tonight, we're asking for $300,000 to push back in this territory of Chicagoland and beyond, the state of Illinois, Northwest Indiana, and really that reverberates nationally. For only $700,000-800,000 a year, we're able to make a difference. We're not going to change the scene on our own, but this is a situation where oceans are made of drops. This is a situation where the more we contribute collectively, and we have peers in other states and other offices, we have other organizations, other individuals and activists, you'll hear from some tonight. The totality of our contributions, when we are all working together in order to make this difference, you will find change happening over time. This is the only way change has ever happened, incrementally, but persistently and consistently is the key, and strategically. And all of these things can't happen if I'm working on my own or you're working on your own. When you have an organization, we study, we research, we monitor, we analyze. When we're looking at Islamophobes, for example, we're watching what they say. We're watching who funds them. We're watching where they're going. We're watching the difference and influence they're trying to have. You heard from this individual who's now a congresswoman. Once upon a time, she was just another person lurking on those anti-Muslim blogs and websites. She was selected and empowered by those who saw an opportunity. and pushed her into a leadership position where now she is one of those who can legislate laws to hurt us. We saw how that happened also with this outgoing president, and how the Muslim ban and other executive orders against Muslims and other minorities. Because here's the thing, when we're talking about the hatred and bigotry against Muslims, there is something specific to it. There is a history to it. We can talk about, for example, motivations that come from the right-wing Zionist sides and the right-wing evangelical sides and the Eurabia theorists and the, neo-crusaders and all of that stuff. But there's also a lot of it that is basically part of the same fabric of hate that targets African Americans. And of course, there's intersection between Muslims and African Americans, as well as Latinos and others, but that targets Latinos, that targets Asians, that targets minorities. This country is an experiment in democracy. It's also an experiment in pluralism like no other. Therefore, some of its challenges are unique to it. Some are shared, but even the ones that are shared, it's accentuated here in the United States because of how pluralistic we are. Imagine bringing so many different people, so many different backgrounds to live as one. And then you'll find the dynamics that come out of that. Sometimes greatness, oftentimes greatness, and we are part of that greatness. We are part of this nation, and we're contributing to its greatness. And sometimes you'll find fault lines. And one of the greatest fault lines in this specific history of the United States of America has been white supremacy, has been white nationalism from the very beginning. Recently, I saw a post on Facebook about how ironic it is for Americans to fly the Nazi flag along with the US flag, because we fought Nazis in World War II and the whole world watched and know that this is the case. And I understand the reality of the basic truth of this. It is true that we went to war with the Nazis and that we fought fascism. But it's also true that while Nazism is foreign to our lands, white supremacy has been very American from the beginning. It is true that there has been, for example, different ways in which this white supremacy, different than Nazism, has shown. Sure, we didn't have gas chambers. We can perhaps feel good about that low bar, or we can challenge ourselves to look at how we had slavery, how we put human beings in shackles, at the same time that we were waxing lyrical on democracy and freedoms. It wasn't for everyone. We can talk about genocide. It wasn't through gas chambers, but it was genocide against Native Americans. And both times, for both reasons, it was about wanting to live more comfortably, to be richer, to have free labor or someone else's land. Whatever it was about self-interest against or at the expense of someone else's misery. We see a continuation of that today. And I want to close in the next minute by saying that all of these challenges that have been in our history and remain, the legacy remain, there is a flip side to that. There are millions of Americans who stand up and say, no, we want change. We've had our greatness from the start. The things in the Constitution, for example, many of them theoretical, many of them practical. We try to push the theory to practice. We're always great. And even those issues I discussed, there were those who pushed back and still push back. The civil rights movement, the legacy of that today. But every time we push back, there are those who resist. And today, that legacy continues. The legacy of white supremacism on one hand, and the legacy of those who resist with a civil rights push back on the other. And we are in the middle of that movement. And I'll turn it now to my good brother, Imam Kifah Mustafa.
Jazakallah khair, Akhi Ahmed, one more time. I just want to share a couple thoughts with you here tonight, and again urge you all to make a donation. Whoever is watching us here, and people will be watching this live stream later on. It's not just people who are with us here tonight. Adding a contribution to the concept of justice is adding a contribution to the preservation of the human race. When the Prophet ﷺ received the very first lines of Quran, read in the name of your Lord, the one who taught by the pen, and his wife Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha took him to her cousin Waraqa ibn Nawfal. What did Waraqa say to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He said, I wish I will be young and strong when people will force you out from your hometown. He said, are they going to force me out of my hometown? He said, no one speaks that which you have brought, but will be forced out from his hometown. What are we talking about? If it was the Muslims, if it was other religions, other people who stand with us and speak on behalf of the other side of the story, like my brother Ahmed was talking about, we're talking about freedom, the concept that God had gave us all, the concept of free will, that we have the choice to choose whatever we want in a freedom way. We have to stand for justice, for equality. These concepts all are embedded in what Islam is all about. So when you are giving fi sabilillah, you are protecting these themes as an American and as a Muslim. It goes in harmony and aligns with the constitution that we live under and with the faith-based foundation that is embedded in the Holy Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is a call for you to make a donation tonight. If it was again, the target is to hit $300,000. It's not much for an organization that has been serving us for almost 2 decades now. This is the concept. If I am an imam and someone calls me for any case of discrimination, or someone was even bullied at school or whatever, the first thing we do, we call CAIR-Chicago and we tell them, what can we do? And we talk. And then we come back and we say, okay, this is the masjid's role to bring awareness. And we did that when we had issue in Stag High School here in the Southwest area. We did things that we took our side and we did our portion as an awareness, but the real work, the active work, the legal work, the media work, it is all because of CAIR. And they need to be able to serve us. If we don't bring them to this level of service and the way we support them, then we're not going to be able to have any type of idea of how can we speak and protect ourselves. And this is why I'm going to ask you to make a pledge tonight, whatever you can. Even if it was $10 a month, make it something, قليل دائم خير من كثير منقطع. If you give little but continuously, it is better sometimes than just giving an amount and then you cooling off. And for all those people who are following us tonight also, make a donation that will be recorded in your book of deeds with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not here to tell you about how Allah will reward you, although I'll just bring some couple things to your attention. This is not money that is being wasted, not at all. It is money that is being saved for you on an individual level with Allah, but it is money that is working for easing injustices on people. If we don't stand for justice and protect it, it will not be there for us on the long term. When the ban was, back to what Waraqa was saying about people will force you out, we are expecting with the new administration that the ban is the first, decision to be taken and lifted off. So we are seeing the fruits coming back because when people took to the streets and when people stood in the airports, there wasn't a nationwide movement to tell them do that. They did it because they believed it was their right to do that. And no one can change the Constitution rights in that way. We need to stand with that concept. And the best people who are our ambassadors to communicate with the public, with other officials. You've seen, the mayor of Chicago, you've seen the Durban, our senator, you've seen our governor, Pritzker, and you're going to see probably others who have spoken in support of this effort that's brought by CAIR. And we are backing them up as institutions, as organizations, but we need the individuals, we need the public to help us with whatever amount they can. This is where the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best deed that Allah loves. When the Prophet was asked, what is a good deed that Allah loves? He said, to bring, ease. Man farraja an mu'minin kurbatan min kurab ad-dunya, farraja Allahu anhu kurbatan min kurab al-akhirah. If you bring ease to the heart of an individual, Allah will bring ease to your heart at the day of judgment when you need that the most. So this is my call for you tonight. Do not hesitate to give. Please do that, whatever amount you can afford. Number two, forward this message by sharing or telling people about it. There are pledge forms available on CAIR-Chicago, website that you can forward it, print it, mail, or just send a check, because the line is down there with your text, and make the contribution tonight. And I'm going to leave you with this note, inshallah ta'ala. We are dedicated to stand and support, as I'm talking here as Imam Kifah, your brother, as here at the prayer center. And I know that it is in your heart there. But it is not enough just to say, I like what CAIR does. You know, mashallah, they're doing good in the media. They're speaking on our behalf. Allah called money in the Quran, جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ قِيَامًا. Money makes you stand up. If you don't have finances, you cannot stand up. You're just going to be sitting down and everyone else will be like, you know, attacking you. We know that we cannot function, we cannot produce programs, we cannot do any type of service without finances. This is an appeal on a personal level from your own imam here at the prayer center of Orland Park, from your own servant here at the prayer center of Orland Park, not to hesitate, but to make a pledge regardless of the amount. We would love the pledges of $10,000. And this is also another message, Akhi Ahmed and the staff, that other masajid should all be in the business of also making pledges and supporting CAIR-Chicago. I've seen some masajid that made that pledge already, but this is something every masjid in Chicago should contribute to that. And institutions should do that before any of the individuals. And this is the way we care for each other, because this is CAIR-Chicago. We love Chicago, we love CAIR, we love Brother Ahmed and all the staff with him. May Allah reward you all, may Allah bless you. Back to you, Akhi Ahmed, and may Allah be with you all, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Yifah. I could not have said it better myself. This notion that we all have a role to play, we just heard from our attorneys a little while back, and I guarantee you, I know these guys, I know their education, I know their experience. They could be making double, triple what they're making at CAIR-Chicago. They made the choice. I'm not going to speak about myself. I'm not going to speak about, but these individuals, they made a choice to be here for a reason. It's the only way that we can do this work. We can't afford, either we're going to have attorneys that are low par, or we're going to have attorneys that are super expensive, or thanks to individuals like this, after Allah, we're going to have really qualified individuals come in and serve people through our organizations pro bono entirely. So we'll say more about what it means to invest in an organization like this, what it means to step up like we all have to do. And it's not just about defending against Islamophobia. It's about empowering our community, empowering our future generations. It's about positive, proactive work. It's not just defensive and reactive. It is about ensuring that our truth, our reality is mirrored into the public imagination and consciousness and media and you name it. I'm tired of looking at my community and seeing success after success, and then looking at watching television or, you know, reading magazines and just, I can't identify how they portray Islam and Muslims or how people react to some Muslims on the street. So I want to now turn it over to my dear sister, Dr. Aisha Lameen. But first, we want to just watch a short video. I'll be right back.
So I know you all saw the passion of all of the speakers. We learned about the TAP program, the travel assistance program, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Halal diets in prisons, language revision for ID services. I mean, we have attorney superheroes. I seriously was looking for a cape because, I mean, to swoop down and really fight for justice. And I know if we were in person, you would be giving standing ovations and applauding. We're asking for that applause to come through a form of donation at CAIR-Chicago.org, or if on Facebook, please donate there. In our first segment, we had elected officials that supported and partnered with our community. In this segment, I have the pleasure of welcoming some of our community members who found the strength to run and represent us in elected office, because representation matters. Next up, we have Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. After serving for 12 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, Keith Ellison was sworn in as Minnesota's 30th Attorney General in 2019. He was both the first Muslim in Congress and the first Muslim state Attorney General. He's probably the one that our Islamophobe was talking about with you can't swear in on the Quran as he did. It is my honor to introduce you this evening, Attorney General Ellison.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Keith Ellison, Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. I was the member of Congress for 12 years. So many of you helped me year in, year out. Thank you very much. And let me share this with you, my dear brothers and sisters of Chicago CAIR. Thank you for your commitment to justice. It's so essential in the times we are living in. Everybody knows that over the last 4 years, we had a president come into office talking about banning, quote unquote, all Muslims, and then found a way after rubbing on it and sort of like manipulating the situation to get the Supreme Court to pass it. And of course, that same Supreme Court took a blind eye to all of the discriminatory things that president said and just looked at the four corners of the policy and said, well, it's okay for the president to, make sure that he vets people who immigrate to the U.S. Of course, the backstop on that background we knew all about. But throughout this period, CAIR-Chicago has been on the front lines fighting for justice. 6,000 cases negotiated, nearly $2 million in money that was collected for people who were victims of discrimination. This is a very important thing. And I just want to let you all know that devoting your time, energy, and resources to keeping CAIR-Chicago on the front line is so very important. And also, let me just add, the moment that we're going into won't be a cakewalk. Yes, it's true. We won't have a president who's spewing hate. That's true. But we will have a lot of other people across this country who are willing to discriminate, ignore, suppress, and deny people opportunity. The fact is, no matter whether we have a Democrat or Republican president, the reality of some people remains the same. Sometimes we even know that they're discriminating against the president. All of us remember how Barack Obama was accused of being a secret Muslim. Well, I'm not a secret Muslim. I'm an open and out Muslim, and so are all of you. And we are not afraid to be who we are, and we thank God for the privilege of being Muslim. But I will say that your efforts, your commitment remains as important as ever. We won't get a reprieve from the discriminators. In fact, it might even be tougher than before, because one of the things we know is that white supremacist violence and organizing has really kicked into a whole new gear, and they are working, they're organizing, and it's going to be up to us to continue to assert liberty and justice and fairness for everyone. So with that, let me say absolutely all the best. May God reward all of your good deeds, and consider your brother Keith your friend, inshallah, into the future. Thank you very much.
We indeed do consider you our friend, Attorney General. As you said so beautifully, we are blessed to call ourselves Muslim and have an organization like CAIR to make sure that right is defended. I'm excited to have Congresswoman Ilhan Omar with us this evening as part of our virtual banquet. Representative Omar is the voice of Minnesota's 5th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. She was sworn into office in 2019, making her the first Somali American member of Congress, the first woman of color to represent Minnesota, and one of the first 2 Muslim American women elected to Congress, along with Rashida Talib, who we'll hear from later in the program. I am in awe of her, and I welcome her to CAIR Banquet.
Assalamu alaikum, CAIR-Chicago. I wish I could have been with you for your banquet, but I'm happy to be able to talk to you now. I've been thinking about this year's theme, Reimagining Justice. And I'm struck by the moment we find ourselves in. We spent the last 4 years fighting tooth and nail to stop a president and his enablers from dismantling every aspect of justice we depend on in this country. But now we can look forward. I think this is one of the most crucial opportunities we have had in our lifetimes, not just to repair the damage of the last guy, but to make it better than it was before, to imagine something new. Imagine what we could build if we keep organizing, if we keep winning. We could raise the minimum wage for the first time in a decade, giving tens of millions of working Americans, most of them women and people of color, a desperately needed raise. We could pass a comprehensive prescription drug reform bill so that no one in this country ever has to ration their insulin or choose between their drugs and their light bill. We could pass a comprehensive, common sense firearms bill that includes universal background checks, a ban on military-style assault rifles, and invest in mental health services nationwide. We could pass a new Voting Rights Act and finally end the long-standing Republican effort to prevent the working class and people of color across America from exercising their right to vote. We can protect the vulnerable. We can provide for the poor. We have the opportunity to make real lasting change, to reimagine what's possible. Martin Luther King said, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice." I'm imagining a truly peaceful country, an America where justice is present for all. I can't wait to fight for it with you.
With you at the helm, we will get there. Thank you for reminding us of all of the possibilities of the future that lies ahead, Congresswoman Omar. Okay, it's later now. I mentioned that we would be honored with Congresswoman Rashida Talib, who represents the 13th District of Michigan. She is a well-known progressive warrior. In her own words, she is a mother working for justice for all. Her two sons are at the root of her unwavering passion to help change lives for the better. Without further ado, Representative Talib.
Assalamu alaikum, it's Congresswoman Rashida Talib. Congratulations, CAIR-Chicago, for all of the important work that you've been doing to fight against the hate agenda and to really show up for our community and for our neighbors. This has been a very difficult time, not only with the global pandemic, but just so much darkness within policy, within so much, again, from our Black and Brown neighbors experiencing the truly uprising and oppressive policies and just hate rhetoric that has been very painful for many of us. So I want to uplift all of your work, but I also want to remind you that our faith, our deen, reminds us that after we take care of our family and our home, it is our responsibility, our duty to show up for our community that we live in. So I hope we're doing that. If anything, we're exposing our faith through such a profound way, through service of others, especially the most vulnerable. So thank you, and inshallah you all are safe and you're well, and please know that you always have a partner in the United States Congress. Take care, and assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. We now have a small partner segment that we would like to introduce.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. CAIR is one of the few organizations who has taken the important role of ensuring that American ideals, values of justice and equality are applied to minorities, specifically American Muslims. These past few years, we witnessed turbulent times with a rise in racism and bigotry. CAIR has been at the forefront of protecting the rights of Muslims. CAIR is zakat eligible.
On behalf of the ACLU of Illinois, I am so happy to be here to celebrate the work of CAIR-Chicago. CAIR-Chicago is a strategic, thoughtful partner in the battle against Islamophobia and hatred, both here in Chicago and across the country. We are proud to stand with you and to celebrate the work of CAIR-Chicago today and moving forward.
Assalamu alaikum. I was asked the question, why support CAIR-Chicago? The answer is easy. CAIR-Chicago is vigilant in the pursuit of any potential threats against our community. CAIR-Chicago is aggressive in pursuing those transgressors of our civil rights and liberties. And CAIR-Chicago is resourceful in crafting solutions to stem religious intolerance in our society. Now more than ever, in this increased climate of intolerance, we need a partner like CAIR-Chicago. Please join me in supporting CAIR-Chicago. Thank you.
This Jewish American supports CAIR-Chicago because, as the last 4 years of Trump's government by hate has taught us, none of us are safe when any of us are vulnerable. For this reason, we must stand together against Islamophobia, xenophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, and all other forms of systemic hatred. This is why I donate to CAIR-Chicago, volunteer as a lawyer in support of CAIR-Chicago's defense of Muslim civil rights, and help CAIR-Chicago build coalitions to unite diverse communities in the struggle for social justice.
Hi, my name is Ben Rohde. I work at Lake Forest College, and we have been partnered with CAIR-Chicago for, I think, better part of the last 11 years. The last 3 years, I've worked with Gerald Hankerson, and we've had students come in for internships multiple different times. And I can't say enough about my appreciation for Gerald, for CAIR-Chicago, and the ability to have our students have practical work experiences for a valuable nonprofit in the Chicago area. We're so thankful. Yeah, appreciate all that CAIR does and all that they've done for our students.
The Illinois Muslim community is one of the largest in the nation. We are vibrant, complex, and complicated. To take care of our residents' needs, we have organizations that focus in specific areas and specialize. We at the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition focus on civic and political. CAIR-Chicago, our great partner, focuses on civil rights and Islamophobia crises. We know that CAIR-Chicago has all our backs. Thank you, CAIR-Chicago team, for another great year of critical and urgent work.
I'm proud to be American. I'm proud to be Muslim. CAIR-Chicago defends my right to both.
CAIR-Chicago protects my family.
We advocate for you. Help us make an impact.
CAIR-Chicago protects our civil rights.
CAIR-Chicago protects my civil rights.
In court
or in the media.
We advocate for you.
We are preserving your liberties.
Your safety.
Our safety.
Our identity.
My generation will take our community, our nation, to new heights. But in order for us to do that, we need your generation to do its part today.
I want to thank all of our partners and all of our elected officials. And Ben, I agree with you on Gerald. He is a gem in our community, and he's one of my longest serving colleagues. And it is truly an honor to work with him and see how he motivates and inspires youth every day. Also, we're very, very proud of our sponsors and very grateful for their support. Without our sponsors, this event would not get us close to the goal that we need to get to, as we might. So thank you very much for our diamond sponsors, the Mosque Foundation and Zakat Foundation, to our platinum sponsors, the Islamic Center of Naperville and the Downtown Islamic Center and Ifanka, and our gold sponsors, Pies Projects, Islamic Foundation North, the Mecca Center, Peoria Muslim Community, and all of those who have sponsored us this evening. We're very thankful for your support. And we will now transition to watch a short ad from one of these great sponsors, one of the two diamond, and that is the Zakat Foundation.
Thank you. Wow. Just to hear all the different partnerships that we engage in is very inspiring. I hope as an audience you are becoming more informed and more inspired by the work of CAIR-Chicago. So we're at the last portion of our evening with the much anticipated guest speaker segment. It is my distinguished pleasure to introduce Dr. Dalia Fahmy, who serves as an associate professor of political science at Long Island University, where she teaches courses on U.S. foreign policy, world politics, international relations, military and defense policy, causes of war, and politics of the Middle East. Dr. Fahmy is a senior fellow at the Center for Global Policy in Washington, D.C., and a visiting scholar at the Center of the Study of Genocide and Human Rights. She has also won several academic awards and fellowships for her research, including one as a 2016 recipient of the Newton Prize for Excellence in Teaching. And the 2017, she was named the Source of the Week by NPR. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce you this evening, Dr. Fahmy. We are not able to hear you.
Oh, okay. So everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Amin. It's truly an honor to be in your presence. Thank you so much, Ahmed Rahab, and the entire CAIR-Chicago team. I'm really humbled by everything I've just heard. Brothers and sisters, when we look at our political landscape, our social landscape, in light of what's happened this past week, the past 4 to 5 years, and the past decade, it seems that we're at a critical juncture where it seems that, the future looks bleak. And if there's one thing that's described the United States in the age of Trump, it's been hate. Over the past few years, hateful groups have emerged on the scene, from white nationalists, the international white power movement, anti-Black racists, Islamophobes, anti-Semites. The list goes on and on. And the disturbing truth is that hate has not just been amplified, it's been normalized and institutionalized. Just ask many of the Muslim leaders today and the hate that they face, the defamation campaigns they face. Just last week, we saw that the name of Congressman Andre Carson was among the list of those that were targeted because he is Muslim, among others. Or you can ask the average Muslim American child today, where according to ISPU, 1 in 4 Muslim children is the victim of bullying. According to the FBI, over the past 5 years, there has been a 17% annual increase every single year, 17% compounded increase in Islamophobic hate crimes. And this has been consistent over the past 5 years. And they state that this has been the most anti-Muslim time period in American history. We often think that Islamophobia manifests in attacks on mosques, but it's not just mosques. It's women in head covering, men in turbans, Muslim or Sikh, but also it's beyond the kind of physical attacks. It's become actually targeting the symbols of Islam and Muslims, because the ultimate goal is to dehumanize Islam and Muslims, to dehumanize this as not belonging to kind of the fabric of society. When we think about fear of Islam, it's become more and more prominent in everyday political discourse, from nationwide anti-Islam rallies, controversies surrounding mosque zonings, illegal surveillance of MSAs, the attempt to pass anti-Sharia legislation in over 24 states, the vitriol coming out of the political establishment that's been questioning whether Muslims in office can be trusted. It seems that anti-Muslim sentiment is on the rise. According to Gallup, 48% of Muslim Americans say that they've experienced racist or religious discrimination. And unfortunately, we have seen the end result of this, of burning down of Islamic schools, attacks on mosques, murder, and attacks on religious scholars. Political campaigns include language that the United States is a Judeo-Christian nation, indicating that Islam has no place here, that a Muslim president couldn't be trusted, that Muslims can't hold elected office in cabinet positions, that mosques should be closed and surveilled. Essentially, there are elected officials, not marginal voices, but elected officials that believe America should exclude Muslims from the definition of what it means to be American. Now, for me, as someone who studies this, it all came to head very publicly in 2015. 2015, in one of President Obama's last State of the Union addresses, when he's stating the State of the Union is in front of every member elected office. And he says that this is a country that will not tolerate rising anti-Semitism. And the entire congressional body, rightfully so, stands up and applauds that he says we will not tolerate rising anti-Semitism. But in his next breath, President Obama says, and this is a country that will stand against rising anti-Muslim sentiment. And the entire chamber was silent. Muslim Americans heard this loud and clear, that we don't belong, and for the first time, our elected officials are starting to agree. And that is Islamophobia. You know, we think about Islamophobia, and Ahmed already mentioned this, as the irrational fear about Islam and Muslims, the perpetuation of negative stereotypes, but that's not what Islamophobia is. There's actually a political objective. The bias and discrimination and marginalization aims to exclude Muslims from American social, political, and civic life. That there's a political objective here, that everyone sees us as not belonging, and that we see ourselves as not belonging. There's a political objective. And irrationality leads to the propagation of these myths around Muslims. And we fear these myths because they're just simply not true. The falsehoods about scaring Muslims, scaring people about Islam and Muslims, making them distrustful of their fellow Americans, it's perpetuated by this narrative. But we know the truth. Muslims are everywhere. Here on the East Coast, over 20,000 physicians, driving your taxis, feeding you on the street, heading your banks, your hospitals, fixing your teeth, paving your roads. Muslims are your first responders, and Muslims are coming up with a COVID vaccine and inshallah cure. Muslims both died on 9/11 and helped erect the first steel beam in One World Trade Center today. In a recent book written about Muslim American veterans of all wars, it lists the names of Muslims who have fought for this country, going back to the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812 and the Civil War and World War I and World War II. Muslim scholars, 20% of whom were women, were among the slaves brought to this country from Africa that helped build this country while preserving their Islamic identity when it was deemed illegal. And we know the numbers. When Gallup released their study on Muslim Americans, especially women, some of the most highly educated religious minority groups, Muslim Americans are the most economically stable, that we have economic gender parity. Basically, statistically speaking, Muslim Americans are productive, educated, and civic-minded individuals. My colleague at the University of Seattle conducted a study that finds that the more mosque-going you are, the more you are in touch of the Muslim community, the more civic-minded you become. And my former advisor at Princeton University finds that the more you understand the Quran, not read it, but understand it, the more pro-justice for all you become. Being pro-justice, as reflected in CAIR, is not just our civic duty, but it's our religious obligation, which is reflected in the theme for tonight. But according to Gallup, 86% of Americans see Muslims in a negative light, that there's a negative association with the word Muslim. And this is worse than it was 1 week after 9/11. And it's because those very American values that we talk about are being undermined. Islamophobia has led to the return of an exclusionary identity where Muslims are increasingly the threat. And how does all of this affect our identity when it's constantly defined for us? When Muslims are told you are not us, then we're reacting. We're reacting to narratives and theoretical frames that have already been decided for us. And we cannot accept this. We cannot accept how Islamophobia treats us and who we are. And so this is where the work of CAIR comes in. The rejection of Islamophobia, the insistence that belonging to as Muslim Americans is part of the social fabric of the United States is really important. Why? In 2017, a study released by the Yaqeen Institute says that 1 in 3 Muslim American children today doesn't want to tell others that they're Muslim because they're scared. And 1 in 2 simply don't know that you can be both Muslim and American. That half of Muslim youth today think that there's a contradiction between being Muslim and American because of what they hear from the outside, not because what they see from the inside. Brothers and sisters, Muslim youth are increasingly seeing that the odds are stacked against them. And this ultimately shapes how young people identify. Because when you're told you don't belong, you might start to believe it, even if you think that you don't belong anywhere else but here. The birth of the Islamophobia that Ahmed mentioned earlier, at least $50 million per year, this billion-dollar industry is there to tarnish the image of Islam as anti-West, anti-woman, anti-Semitic, anti-justice, angry, and anti-everything. But brothers and sisters, all is not bleak, because CAIR has been on the front lines for the fight for civil liberties and representation from day one. CAIR has been here for you, CAIR has been here for me, CAIR has been here for us. When we think about dark moments in both our Islamic history and in our American history, there's always been a group of people who stood up in the middle of the darkness, who stood up for truth. And when you think about Ahmed and his team at CAIR-Chicago, that is the light in the darkness at this moment. You know, to young people today who are feeling this level of uncertainty, you should know that Ahmed and his team are the ones ensuring that we will hold steadfast to reclaiming the American ideals, because American ideals that are under attack today are going to require voices that stand up for those ideals. So not only are they standing up for us as Muslim Americans, but they're actually standing up for what America really is all about. And when they're doing that, they're actually telling Trump and Cruz and Miller and Gingrich, who are making statements against Muslims, that we don't care what you say, that you will not define me, that I will reclaim my identity. I have a sense of izzah. I'm a Muslim. If you look at Ahmed and his team, you see that this is the generation of Muslim Americans standing on the shoulders of giants of our past. You know, today, we talk about Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. This is the generation standing on their shoulders that's working against injustice. From the work of CAIR-Chicago, we see that until we get into the inner city and work for a just society, not just for ourselves, that breaks the boundaries of privilege and says that we're not going to fight just for Muslim rights, but for everyone's rights, for equal access to education, not just for our kids, all kids. Affordable housing, not just for Muslims discriminated against, for everyone, against not just mass incarceration of Black men in this country, but trying to undermine what we know about the for-profit prison industrial complex, that our story is fundamentally tied to the stories of others, moving beyond the lip service of the past, and that we can't break the Islamic phobic narrative without fighting against the structural injustice that exists for everyone. And this is what CAIR has been doing and continues to do, who has changed the narrative both within and outside the Muslim community. CAIR is raising the bar for all of us. They're countering the narrative. Remember that $50 million a year for the Islamophobia industry? Then think about CAIR as being the great equalizer against that industry. You know, when you measure success of institutions, we often look at buildings, structures, masajid, schools, publications even. But you know where real success is? It's in the intangibles. It's in quality of life. It's in freedom of expression, freedom to practice our faith. That's where real success is. And that's what CAIR is in the business of doing. CAIR is the torchbearer that will guarantee this for us, bi'idhnillah. And when you think of giving today, I know we all came in with a number, but whatever number you had in mind tonight, I want you to listen to when I say you need to double it. Yes, in an unstable economy, you need to double it. Why? If you think about the work that CAIR does, on average, this CAIR office performs at least $2 million worth of pro bono community legal work. Think about that. At least $2 million a year of pro bono community legal work, and all they're asking for us tonight is $300,000. That when I feel discriminated against, my first phone call is to CAIR. When someone feels that their rights are not being met, their first phone call is to CAIR. And we're never asked for anything. You know, maybe we make dua, but if you think about $2 million a year of pro bono legal work, the least we can do is actually give and give generously. $300,000 is nothing, brothers and sisters. And so I'll leave you with, please, when you think of giving tonight, think of the compounded work they do, but also think about the compounded reward you will get by believing and continuing to believe in this mission. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Dr. Fahmy, you just dropped the mic. The beautiful history lesson in telling us the data and ensuring that we know the work of CAIR-Chicago. You really laid it out there very eloquently. I'm ready to just go out and defend our community at the highest levels. I really do appreciate your words this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Each year, we are so fortunate to have several dozen high school, college, graduate, and law students join us in supporting our staff as interns. With over 900 interns graduated from our program since its inception, they represent the very best of us from across the world in a multitude of institutions and Ivy League spaces. So we have a few of them here with us tonight to share some of their reflections on their experiences working with CAIR-Chicago. And after they talk, we'll hear again from our executive director, Ahmed Rehab.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon all of you. I'm Christopher Nevades Azdar, and I've had the great pleasure of working with CAIR-Chicago since the summer of 2019, when I interned in the Governmental Affairs and Outreach Department, then continued my work as a joint fellow between CAIR-Chicago and the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition as we did our 2020 census work. Thank you, CAIR-Chicago, for the amazing partner that you were throughout that whole process and continue to be post-census era. We want to thank you for helping us reach the hardest to count and the most marginalized communities all across Illinois, and more broadly, applaud you for the amazing work that you do in protecting and being at the forefront and to respond anytime that there is any discrimination, any hate, or any barriers placed on communities all across the state.
Hello, my name is Juliana Nicolucci Altman, and I was a summer research intern at CAIR in 2020. And I wanted to do this internship because I care very deeply about fighting bigotry and discrimination, both on an individual and a systemic level, especially in our age of rising populism and Islamophobia here at home and all over the world. And also being a proud Chicago native, I wanted to do more advocacy and community building in my own backyard. And from this internship, I was able to develop my journalistic skills, my writing skills. I learned how to prepare and execute an interview, which I'd never done before. And I more generally just expanded my knowledge of the Muslim community here in Chicago. And so the best part of this internship was probably the incredible mentorship that I received from the research coordinator at CAIR, who gave me great feedback and was really supportive of my ideas and helped me make my projects possible. And I also appreciated how self-directed this internship was. It really allowed me to pursue my own interests. So finally, even with all the challenges of COVID and interning online, I came away with the impression that CAIR is truly an awesome organization made up of passionate and knowledgeable and dedicated individuals who are doing admirable work representing the American Muslim community.
I think CAIR-Chicago represents kind of the unsung heroes.
It really focuses on making a tangible difference, and I believe that's why I joined the organization.
It's just something really meaningful to me, and I'm glad to be able to be a part of it because, you know, like my people, I want to help them.
I think one of the things that make our program very unique is that merge of professional development and grassroots activism.
If you're interested in social justice or civil rights, CAIR-Chicago is a very great environment for you to be in.
Every single day, like when I sit down, like I'm doing policy research, I'm organizing an event. So like your work actually goes towards something, which is like the most meaningful experience I think I've had this whole summer.
The day-to-day, like figuring out, is this person being discriminated against at work? What can this person do about a hate crime? Is this person going to be able to apply for asylum? That kind of back and forth and actual like real life help is invaluable.
Intern alumni have went on to Fulbright scholarships to run their own nonprofits, to really have the opportunities to go into the fields of law and politics.
It's a great environment to work in. We're all really close. Everybody bounces awesome ideas off each other, which is great.
The staff and interns are some of the most knowledgeable people I've ever seen or ever talked to in their fields. Just like sitting down with any of the staff members or any of the intern just like for an hour, just like you come out a completely different new person because of how much you just learned in that hour.
Gerald's great. He encourages you to think outside the box and do projects that you didn't know were possible, reach out to those people that you wouldn't have before.
This is an opportunity and experience where you really come to understand that you are one of so many different people that could be an agent of change. You'll get the opportunity to really see how all communities can come together and really be the country that we really wish and hope for.
Thank you. We value our interns greatly, and I'm so glad that they value CAIR-Chicago as much as I do. I'd like to bring back Ahmed Rehab to share a few remarks with Sheikh Kifra. Unmute. Not able to hear you.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, you're on.
There has to be a glitch with every program, but thank you once again. And thank you to our interns who bring such sunshine to our office and to our work and real value to be able to do the work that we do. Because remember, if you're doing the math and you're talking about $700,000, $800,000 a year with all of the staff that we have who are very qualified and the space that we have downtown and the work that we do in terms of programming and the influence that we have in the media and beyond and all the publications and so on and so forth, in order to be able to produce the numbers that we have to depend on a couple of things. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, staff members are willing to take huge pay cuts, who come with great quality. I talked about, Sufyan, but we also have, for example, our litigation director, Phil Robertson. This guy is a former Illinois Assistant Attorney General. This person had his own law firm and was doing really, really well in private practice. He worked in other public organizations. Tamer Abu Zaid, the other attorney that we have now, staff attorney. Georgetown, top-notch legal mind, someone who's worked in private and in public organizations. Both of these individuals, and Sufyan, et cetera, are able to bring down our bottom line by accepting lower compensations while giving us the same value. Why? Because they believe in this work. It's not just a job for most of us. We need to put food on the table, of course, but it is a cause. And I cannot overstate the importance of this when I ask for your support. We try to give in this way. This isn't a lucrative opportunity for any of us. Let's be quite frank. This is a cause. And I believe that for many of you, it is also a cause. So we're partnering together. We do what we can. You do what you can. If you're able to give $10,000, $5,000, $10, $5, whatever it is, the important thing is we agree on the importance of this cause and we all put something in. That's how communities are built. That's how movements are created. That's how change is brought about. When multiple heads, multiple hands, multiple hearts are pouring in the same direction, we understand the problem and we are able to synthesize solutions when we work together. I'm also very proud of all of my staff members, really. Sadia and her amazing talent, University of Chicago. We have also with us Natalie, who's Latino American, and the diversity of this organization is really something. We have with us also Hannah, and both Natalie and Hannah, really good, talented people. This is a staff that I can be proud of. The interns that we have, amazing as well. 900 plus interns graduated now. The 800 is an old number. Again, kudos to Gerald and his work in that. These are individuals, young men and women, who are able to find a space at a Muslim organization in order to hone their talents and serve their communities. And they're not just Muslim. I think at this point we have close to 50% non-Muslim from various religious backgrounds, racial backgrounds, ethnic and national backgrounds, but they all work for a Muslim organization and for an American and human cause, civil rights and human rights respectively. And that brings me great pride. It brings me great pride because I did not have that opportunity growing up. Growing up, which some might argue is a long time ago, but I wouldn't argue that. I did not have these opportunities. And so it really means something to be able to create these opportunities for others. I envied other communities who had spaces like this. I wish I could have interned in a place like this and have had someone mentor me early in my career, rather than have to learn the hard way and start earlier than I did. So because of your support and because of your belief in creating community spaces that serve the public, but also is an incubator for talent, these 900 individuals are in very, very influential places. Some are still, young and in school, but many of them now are, chiefs of staff at congressional office. Not many, but some. We have many who are working in their own private practices very successfully. Some have taken on public positions and are directors of other organizations, just as I am here. They've caught up and exceeded, mashallah, and they're still quite young. So this is really an incubator of talent, and it's a place where our young people can feel that there's a place for them where they can belong and where they can train and where they can communicate the fears they have about being potential Muslim leaders or working for causes that affect the Muslim community in this environment, and get the reassurance that you can do it, that you have what it takes, that we know the terrain. And I'm proud of the non-Muslim students, honestly, and interns who are working with us, because they also understand that this is not just about one community. But the numbers that we have really tell their own story. I mentioned the 900 interns that have graduated over the past 15 years, but we've had 6,080 civil rights cases of anti-Muslim discrimination and negotiated close to $2 million for our clients. We've conducted 1,650 mainstream media interviews. Think of the value, as Dalia Fahmy mentioned, who, by the way, is someone that I admire greatly, and she inspires me personally with her intellect and with her insight. But she mentioned an office like this can generate the equivalent of $2 million a year in civil rights work or in legal work in general, that if you had gone to an attorney who's in private practice and had them do this same line of work, and maybe Phil will argue that it's a lot more than 2 million, but at least 2 million. And so that number is being saved for the community. If you try to put in advertising, positive advertising on television, on the networks, 1,650 mainstream interviews, positive representation, pushing back against Islamophobes, against hatred, against bigotry, against narrow definitions of what it means to be Muslim that are almost always tainted with stereotype, and widening that to show the real tapestry, the real diversity, the real tent under which Muslims live, that has all colors and all backgrounds, has its problems, but it has its genius, has its brilliance, right? No less than any other community. To be able to project this truth. And this work is not about putting lipstick on a pig. This work is about removing the tarnish that others have placed on this community to show its true glow. This glow exists. It exists every day. We have nothing to apologize for. We have everything to be proud of. And if individuals out there, they commit a crime, even if it's in our name, we have now been able to push back enough where I think the public narrative's changing to understand that these individuals do not represent everyone. We tend to understand that when this person who commits a crime in the name even of larger communities other than themselves, white supremacists, that they don't represent your white neighbor, that they don't represent your white boss or white underling or whatever it is. But when it comes to African Americans or to Muslims or to Latinos or other minorities on faith, on ethnicity, on race, suddenly we have to do the uphill battle just to tell others we are normal. I mean, something has to change. We have to go back to the basics. We have to go back to the fact that much of this racism, much of this bigotry is, as Dalia mentioned, about pushing us out, about telling us we don't belong. Why? That question is also important. We don't stop at that conclusion. Why is important? It depends who you're talking about. If you're talking about certain white supremacist groups or mentalities, they don't have to be card-carrying members. It is about the notion that I am better. I will be safer, happier, richer if you're out of my life. This inherent sense of megalomania, delusion, whatever it is, has been fed through stories, readings of history, readings of the Bible even, into many generations, to the point where, as I mentioned, other human beings could be put in shackles and shipped from another continent and put in labor in order to enrich and bring comfort to such individuals. That mentality lingers. It might not be in slavery today, but it lingers in other ways. It lingers in the mentality of some of these policemen who think that young Black boy's life is not really worth that much. I'd rather err on the side of a lack of caution on his life, more caution for me. Even the caution for him doesn't even exist. It's all in here. We're talking about this white supremacist, white nationalist, whatever you want to call it, sense of I'm better. But also, in addition to this, there are other ideologies out there. There is, for example, and I hinted at this earlier, if you're talking about why they want to push us out, keep us out, there are those who believe that Muslims, being another religion that people convert into, is in competition with Christianity. And as such, those right-wing radical evangelical Christians or non-evangelical, whatever denomination they might be, might believe that it is in their political and religious interests to keep Muslims away from being seen as equal, from being seen as American, from having access to politics and power, because they'll bring more of this Islam to compete with our Christianity. There are those in the right-wing Zionist movements or in the Zionist movements who believe that we are a threat to their narratives, that Israel is the only democracy. When we talk about Palestinian human rights, which is part of our justice narratives as Muslims, this isn't a political issue for us. This is a human rights issue, a justice issue. For some in that group, they are threatened by this. And they believe that the more of us are out there, the more voices we have, the more we're in Congress, the more we're in the media, we're going to chisel at that very comfortable narrative they've been able to shove down the throats of most Americans because there's been no resistance over the years, and begin to bring an alternative. And so there'll be less money going for military benefits from our Congress, from our tax dollars over there. Whatever other agenda items they might have will now be challenged. So there are various different reasons, but the bottom line, whether it's white supremacy and racism, whether it is religious or political agenda, that we are targeted. There's a big target on our backs. And despite that, we have been able to succeed. Despite that, we've been able to build and grow. So I want to conclude by reminding us that these are challenges. Obviously, this is an organization that deals with challenges. You know, this is a medical conference. We're going to be talking about perhaps disease and illness. But the fact that this is what I'm talking about doesn't mean it's the only part of the story. It's just what we're focused on, what we work on. But I do want to zoom out and remind us that there are good people living in this country. There are good human beings that are neighbors and friends and coworkers and strangers who also see what we see. It's not about white and black. It's not about Muslim and Christian. It's not about Palestinian and Jewish. In this country, it is about two groups, really. One that believes that this should be a narrow tent for people who look, who think, who pray, who act like me, whatever that me may be. And those others who believe that really it is a pluralist place. Just like you came from somewhere, I'm coming from somewhere. The fact that you came from God knows where in Europe and landed here doesn't make this place any more yours than if I came from Africa or Asia or wherever else. And so CAIR-Chicago is an organization, and you won't hear more from me tonight, so I want to leave you with this, that works against that tent, for the tent of pluralism, for the tent of justice, for embracing the human rights and dignity of all people, including, of course, our Muslim community that we are sworn to defend. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to my sister, Dr. Aisha.
Thank you. Now you see why I thanked him at the beginning from our entire board. He brings the passion, the knowledge, and the leadership that we need, and that we are so grateful for at CAIR-Chicago.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Next, we're excited to hear from a few more elected officials. We have up with the honor of presenting Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. Lieutenant Governor Stratton serves Illinois as the state's 48th Lieutenant Governor and as the first African-American, period, man or woman, to hold this office. Our Lieutenant Governor, like Mayor Lightfoot, remind me of the possibilities when you are seen, heard, valued, and given the opportunity to serve. They exude Black excellence in a nation that all too often invests in a counter-narrative. It's with a heartfelt welcome that I turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Stratton.
Hello, it's my honor and privilege to join you tonight for CAIR-Chicago's 17th annual gala. Thank you for going virtual. Having a wonderful event like this keeps our spirits lifted as we continue to battle COVID-19. CAIR-Chicago is an Illinois institution that has carved a place in our state's civic tapestry. Your organization works hard towards enriching diversity and strengthening our collective efforts to fight for justice and dignity for all. Tonight's theme is reimagining justice. I love that. We must continue to utilize some of the established avenues of justice, but also transform broken systems and create new pathways to help our most underserved communities. Our marginalized communities, whether they are faith-based or race-based. And I would pause here to note that Muslims are often a combination of both. All communities deserve the same protections and privileges as any other group. We know that our country has not lived up to that promise, but we will fight until that promise is realized. CAIR-Chicago is on the front lines of that battle. The Muslim community is wonderfully diverse. It's Native and it's immigrant. It's Black, brown, and white. The debate has long passed a question of belonging. Now, instead, we are seeing ownership, contribution, and leadership from our Muslim brothers and sisters. I applaud your community that achieves and gives. You are doctors, teachers, shop owners, drivers, scholars, and more. And I congratulate CAIR-Chicago on helping to lead the way for a fairer, healthier society for all. And I want to wish you all the best in your endeavors in the years to come. Peace be unto you all.
And peace be unto you as well, Lieutenant Governor Stratton. Thank you for your kind words and for joining us this evening. Up next, I have the pleasure of introducing Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who was sworn in as the 42nd Attorney General of Illinois in January of 2019. Raoul was born in Chicago to Haitian immigrants and brings a lifetime of legal and policy experience, advocacy, and public service to the Office of Attorney General. Welcome.
Greetings, my friends. We gather virtually in a period of crisis that has held up a mirror to our society. Forced to step away from the activities that previously distracted us, we've been left with time to look deeply into that mirror. In doing so, we've become aware of the ways in which we've tolerated the intolerable. Last week's events at our nation's capital are an example of what grows out of that tolerance, aided and abetted by the words of hate spewed by some of our elected leaders, including the President of the United States of America and an Illinois Congresswoman. In that mirror, we've also seen bias-driven conduct by law enforcement, restrictions on travel based on religious prejudice, institutions that perpetuate injustice to marginalized people, and systems that value the safety of some communities at the expense of others. The Attorney General's office is committed to pushing back in the courtroom, through policy reform, in the services we provide to victims, and through the use of a public platform to denounce hate. We value our partnerships with organizations doing this work in the community, including CAIR, which for 17 years has advocated for Muslims and other communities vulnerable to hate crimes and civil rights abuses. I wish you a successful event and many more years of community impact and advocacy. I thank you for your work.
And we thank you, Attorney General Raul. Please continue to donate to CAIR-Chicago. I know you've heard it many times this evening, but I want to remind you that all of the work that is being done on behalf of the community is pro bono. So make a pledge this evening. Go to CAIRChicago.org to make a donation or donate on Facebook. We are an organization that is driven by passion and by facts. And part of what we do, I want to make sure that we thank, as I thank the executive director, we have a director of research, Tasif Akbar, who ensures that we have the research that we need in order to defend our community. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Chuy Garcia, the Congressman of Illinois' 4th Congressional District, and one of the first Mexican immigrants to be sworn into the US Congress. As a progressive community leader and a friend to the Muslim community, who has been a public servant for almost 40 years, we offer a heartfelt welcome to Congressman Chuy Garcia.
Hi, I'm Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, and I represent the 4th Congressional District of Illinois. Today, I'm proud to congratulate CAIR on 17 years of defending civil rights and condemning bigotry against the Muslim community. Here in Chicago, major steps toward a more equitable society, toward reimagining justice, require making the fight as inclusive as the desired result. We've seen again and again diverse coalitions working together to find power in that diversity. That's what led to the success of the Black and Brown coalitions when I got my start in activism in the 1980s. And it's also part of CAIR's legacy. For the past 17 years, they've provided a crucial voice for the Muslim community, alone and in larger coalitions allied against bigotry and hate. Look, this year, we've got a pretty incredible opportunity. A unified government with a new administration and Democratic House and Senate. We need to do more than reverse the previous president's destructive actions. We have the potential to pass legislation that protects voting rights, expands civil rights, and so much more. My staff and I are committed to those goals, but in order to truly achieve them, our partners are as important as our conviction. I am proud to consider the folks at CAIR as allies and friends in this movement for a reimagined justice, a fairer, more durable justice for all. Congratulations again on 17 years of protecting the Muslim community and advocating for social justice. Here's to more.
Amen. Thank you, Congressman Garcia. We've heard many times tonight the reminder that it's not over with. A new president does not mean that we can let our guards down. So continue to support the work of CAIR-Chicago. Our final elected official of the evening was recently elected and sworn into Congress as Congresswoman Marie Newman. We look forward to some great things that she has ahead of her and will accomplish as an advocate for justice and a friend to the Muslim community. Welcome to CAIR-Chicago Banquet, Congresswoman Newman.
Hello, folks. It's Congresswoman Marie Newman from Illinois 3. So pleased to be at your annual CAIR event to say thank you, applaud you. COVID has been an absolute horror show, and all of your efforts, your partnerships, your amazing work in the community has made a huge difference across Chicagoland, and I applaud you. I also want to let you know that while I've partnered with you before, I will always be here for you. I will always be here for the Muslim and Arab American community. I will always be here with all of these wonderful organizations that you partner with. So please know you can always call my office and you have a friendly partner at the other end. But I also want you to know how I am personally and deeply grateful for all of your hard work for all of Illinois 3. It has made a huge difference in a very terrible time. So thank you, stay well, and have a great day.
Impact.
Respect.
Unrelentless.
Resilience.
Justice. Engaged.
Resilience.
Justice. Educate.
Advocacy.
Resilience.
Solidarity.
Persistence.
Intersectionality. Resilience.
Determined.
Community.
Implacable resistance. Stay fierce.
Unity.
CAIR-Chicago.
Resilience.
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 CAIR-Chicago.
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 CAIR-Chicago. Thank you, Congresswoman Newman, for rounding off our evening of notable officials who support and advocate and partner with CAIR-Chicago. Now I'd like to introduce our last, but by no means our least, closing keynote speaker for the evening, Imam Khalid Latif. Imam Latif is the Executive Director and Chaplain, or Imam, of the Islamic Center at New York University. Imam Latif's exceptional education and ability to cross faith and cultural boundaries on a daily basis brought him recognition throughout the city, so much that in 2007, Mayor Michael Bloomberg nominated Imam Latif to become the youngest chaplain in history of New York City Police Department. He was 24 years old. Since then, he has dedicated himself to America's largest police department and has developed tremendously valuable skills as a spokesperson for coexistence, mutual understanding, and productive relationships between cultures, communities, and religions. I welcome you, Imam. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for having me. Just as a point of clarification before I get into some thoughts, I actually left my role with the police department some years ago, but it was a role that I was in for some time, and likely towards the end of my remarks, I might even get into it a little bit, some of what my experiences were like there. But thank you all so much for having me and including me in what's been an amazing and very inspirational night. In 2007, I actually had another role as well. I was working as the first Muslim chaplain at Princeton University. And I was 24 years old, and when I got on the ground at Princeton University, the people that I was meeting were people like Toni Morrison, Cornel West, one of the then founders of Amazon.com, somebody who was integral to the resurgence of China's economy, people who were beyond just experts, but really remarkable, accomplished individuals. And at 24, it made me really question what I was doing at a place like that. And then the next week that I was there, my second week, I started to get letters from alumni of Princeton University that said things like, "We don't want Muslims at Princeton. Your Sharia law does not have a place in our university. Someone like you should never be at an institution like this." One guy even sent me a 400-page book that he wrote saying that, "Read this, it'll explain to you why someone like you should never be at a place like this." When I went to speak to the heads of religious life there to ask them what I should do, my supervisors, their explanation to me was that simultaneous to my hiring, the head of religious life at Princeton University, the dean of the chapel, a really great man by the name of Tom Breitenthal, he was going to become the Archbishop of Southern Ohio. And because his position was becoming vacant, they were going to launch a search for it. And their explanation to me was that these people are upset because they thought we hired you to be in that role, not in the role that you're in. I said, well, that's even worse. Why couldn't I be the dean of the chapel just because I'm Muslim? And one of the things that happens at Princeton University at the end of every academic year, they celebrate their Princeton pride, and they have a parade that has alumni from decades ago marching with the most recent alums, donning white and orange pinstripe suits and all kinds of Princetonian colors and regalia. And the way the parade goes, the oldest alums start in the beginning, and then wrapping up towards the rear of the procession are the most recent alumni. And as this thing starts, you see class year after class year that bleeds into decades of classes that are pretty much all elderly white men. At some point, you start to see some women, you might start to see some people of color, but by the end of it, it's still mostly white males. One of the things that I was invited to do in my year at Princeton University was attend an unofficial graduation ceremony that takes place at college campuses across the United States called the Pan-African Baccalaureate, where usually Black and brown students, mostly those who are Black and those who identify as African American, celebrate the graduation amongst peers, classmates, family members, friends. And there was a young woman who was the valedictorian of that ceremony who said something that still stays with me even till today. And when she got on the mic, she said to everyone in attendance that just because we are at Princeton does not mean we are of Princeton. And we should never forget the sacrifices that people had to go through in order for us to be at this place. And so our trainings, our credentials, the degrees that we harness, none of it should be for our own individual gain, but should always be to see where we could advance the community and reach a collective and common good. And I think within this anecdote, there's a lot that can go into what we've been talking about tonight. Because the challenges that we have that have been undeniably yet again shown within the pandemic that we have been dealing with for months now, shows us that the educational system, the justice system, the immigration system, the prison system, the healthcare system, pretty much every system that this country is built upon is built within this premise of supremacy, that it does not honor Black life in any way, and its toleration by extension of minorities of any background is one that isn't even mere tolerance, it's simply non-existent. And you can look at what it is that the institutions do in terms of bringing in this notion of embracing supremacy has been talked about by so many, and creating policies rooted in a deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that has to be understood as a root cause of everything that it is that we're seeing these days. 2010 was quite an interesting year for me. We're at New York University, where I now serve as the university's chaplain and director of the Islamic Center. We had done a program with the White House at that time, where President Obama had sent John Brennan, his then head of intelligence, to do a public program with us and our Islamic Center at our School of Law at New York University. And John Brennan, in his remarks, he alluded to a letter that I had written to President Obama early on in his presidency. And he said that the president received your letter. It was published in a magazine. And he wants you to know that he thinks that you are a good example of an American citizen, and other remarks like that. A week later, after the head of intelligence under the Obama administration had come to our center and gave me praises in this way, was the first time the FBI visited me at my house. They knocked on the door early in the morning, and a friend of mine had been staying over in my apartment. I was single at that time. And I had reached out to leadership of New York University. I live in an NYU building, saying that the FBI is in my home. And they sat down in my living room and started to ask me questions. When a head public safety officer from the university intervened and said, "You need to leave. You cannot be in this space. You have no right to be here." The next day, when I left from the building that I live in, and I walked to my car, the same 2 FBI agents were leaning against it, waiting for me. They said, "Why don't you come with us to the federal building?" And I said, "There's no way I'm going with you to a federal building." They then followed me to my office and made themselves comfortable sitting in chairs, but the questions now were more oriented towards me in particular. And after a little bit of time, I said, "What do you really want from me?" And they said, "You're just too good to be true. Know that we're watching you." The challenge that comes with this type of reality has to be understood that it creates not just a physical anxiety, but a psychological shackling potentially. The chilling effect that's there is something that cannot be undermined. For not just weeks, but months, I didn't go to visit my parents in their home. I was wondering who it was that was listening to me on the phone. I didn't know where else to go and was constantly looking over my shoulder. And then you juxtapose it to the realities that this is happening to me at a time where just a week before, the head of intelligence and members of the Obama administration are sitting in our Islamic Center. I was then at that point a member as a chaplain of the New York City Police Department. And these guys can go and rush the Capitol with all kinds of ammunition, and the FBI has no idea who any of them are, where they're coming from, but they know exactly where I live and what my car looks like. To understand this as a system and a structural issue, and to recognize that institutions are what we need to be able to combat what is institutional. That the reality is such that organized evil will always triumph over disorganized righteousness. This is a fact that we have to embrace no matter what. And to understand that this is something that exists systemically and structurally. And to me, anti-Muslim sentiment is symptomatic of a deeply entrenched anti-Blackness that the country has been built upon from day one. As 2010 continued, in my capacity as a police chaplain, one of the things that I would do was attend the 9/11 ceremony at the World Trade Center. And by rank, I was an inspector, a fairly high rank. 1-star chiefs were the next rank above us. And on the 9th anniversary of the attacks that year in 2010, Vice President Biden was there, our now president-elect. And I'm in my uniform, an inspector's uniform. I still have my beard. I have my head covered. We're talking to people, waiting for things to get started. 3 men in suits approached me, saying that Secret Service has spotted you from the top of a building, and they want us to check your credentials just in case. I said, "Just in case what?" And they said, "We're sorry that we're doing this to you." I said, "Then why are you doing it?" And to understand what it is that they question in that moment is not merely my physical presence at that location, but the entire emotional presence that I have attached to that space. Where I was an undergrad at New York University on September 11th in 2001. I stood with about 10,000 of my classmates as we watched the second plane fly into the towers from the middle of Washington Square Park. In the aftermath of it, we dealt with all kinds of bias incidents, policies that you have seen, friends of mine having their houses raided, people tied up in their homes, people lining up outside of INS buildings in the middle of the snow just to register and get checked in. In that moment, they're questioning the validity of all of it. But the frustrating thing isn't that I'm going through it, but what can I really do about it? If I said anything, it would make the circumstance that much worse. And so where I couldn't speak and there was hundreds of people standing and they were saying nothing, there was a mother standing next to me who lost her son on September 11th. And she said to those men that what you are doing right now is more dishonoring to the memory of our loved ones that we lost on that day than anything else. That here this young man is standing with us in our moment of need and you're making it seem as if he's doing something wrong just because he's Muslim. And as easily as they had taken the validation away, she brought it right back. I want you to think about this in a few different frames as I close. One, understand that I'm in a police uniform, an inspector's uniform. And even if I wasn't, it still wouldn't be okay. The realities that minorities face and sees that are rooted in anti-Blackness are things that we cannot undermine. The aspirational understandings of the United States were distinct from the European context from which people left. People there did not say that this would be a space of diversity, but here in this country, they wanted to build diversity. But the recognition is such that when much of Europe was launching transatlantic slave trades and crusades in the name of religion and embraced liberalism and secularism as an antidote for that, not wanting to deal with what was there, this country did not launch its worst battles in the name of any faith tradition. It launched its worst battle, its civil war, around principles of race and ethnicity. The foundational documents of this country afforded full privilege to white males. Women were given nothing, and Black men and women weren't even considered to be a whole person in comparison to their white counterparts. And that's the reality that we still see in existence today. Now, to understand where you are in that moment, for me, standing in that space, and I can tell you deeply what it's like to be detained, profiled, surveilled. And despite that, I still couldn't tell you what it's like to be a Black person living in this country. If someone was to ask me, would you go through it again? I would say that yes, I would. Because in order for certain battles to be won, those battles have to take place in the first place. We might be the only ones that stand and speak, but we might be the first ones to speak so that everyone else gets up. CAIR-Chicago does this impeccably. They serve as a light that goes and illuminates so much and embrace the idea that it does not take a lot of light to push away darkness. But when others are seated, they are constantly standing. When others are silent, they're constantly speaking, moving to ensure that people's needs are being met, that rights will never be infringed while they are doing the important work that they do. And it's our honor to be able to be a part of a night like this, to support them in the good work that they do. And then lastly, and most importantly, what my brother Ahmed was saying that I took away from him, that when you think about a good person, or you have these dystopic thoughts that might tell you that things cannot get better, things can get better and they will get better, inshallah. And you want to think about, in those moments, that mother who stood with me on that day, who leveraged her power and privilege to help serve somebody who was underserved and underprivileged. Because who in their right mind would say something to a mother who lost her son on September 11th while she's standing at the ground zero site on September 11th itself? Nobody. And she knew that. And she simply did what was right because it was the right thing to do. And that kind of ethic, that kind of value is something that we see ever present within many different individuals. Allies who are not performative in their allyship, individuals who will not simply step up for a photo opportunity or leave you hanging when it's inconvenient, but people who are simply trying to do what is the right thing. People like those who work at CAIR-Chicago. And so tonight, you want to do what it is that you can to support them. We see our country in a space where it is now an opportunity to give clear indication that we never ally ourselves to an administration of any kind. That's not what this country's about. But one of the most American things you could do is break out of any box that people put you in that you are most definitely bigger than, step away from a good-bad framework, and let inequity, oppression, and injustice be something that you play every critical role in dismantling for yourself, for those who are around you, or for generations that are going to come after us that should never have to see this kind of nonsense, this bigotry, this hatred again. And so tonight, give what you can to support this amazing team at CAIR-Chicago, and recognize that what it is that we are dealing with is rooted in the systems and structures that are doing what it is that they intended to do. but where we can play a critical role in changing, in refining, and ensuring that it continues to be we as Muslims who are stepping up and simply doing what is right because it's the right thing to do. We'll see that inshallah ta'ala tomorrow will continue to be better than what it is that today seems to surround us with. If I can ever be helpful to any of you in any of the work that you have going on, please don't hesitate in reaching out. It would be an honor to return some of the great benefit that I have received from CAIR-Chicago, even though I'm in New York. And I say this to you not lightly, but I can tell you honestly that every victory and every win that they have in their city, which is a very important city, is a win and victory for all of us. Setting a precedent that says that we will not sit back and be treated in a way that no person should be treated. But we will continue to strive and we will continue to grow. And we will do whatever we can to break down and dismantle what it is that should never have been put into place in the first place. So please do support them with whatever you can. And as has been mentioned before, send out text messages, share links. It's serious work that they are doing and putting themselves at risk for our sake. And so the least that we can do is push out their good works to all the people that we know to ensure that things are getting done as best as they can. Wallahu ta'ala alim wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Imam. And thank you for the point of clarification. Your story was deeply moving, and I appreciate you sharing it with our supporters. And your insightful discussion of systemic and supremacy and its roots in anti-Blackness was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for your words. I'd like to pass the microphone over to our chairman for closing dua, Dr. Kadamia.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu ala rasulillah. I'd like to thank Imam Khalid Latif and Dr. Dalia Fahmy for their precious words and wisdom. I'd like to thank our dignitaries, our elected officials who participated in this program. I would like to thank everybody who was part on the online, community watching today, and those who pledged, even though they were not online. I'd like to thank our volunteers, our staff, and our board members for a job well done, inshallah. CAIR-Chicago fulfills a need that our Muslim community in the United States, have found that we cannot progress anywhere without fulfilling this need, which is our civil rights. And without civil rights, none of us is kind of protected. None of us is safe. And this is a country of law and order, I would say, not as some people understand. It's law and order for everybody, but it's also for rights, civil rights, liberties, all that most people on earth yearn to have. So I don't know how much we did today so far. I hope we met our goals. I would like to address our community and say that it doesn't do any good just to complain and say this has been done to us and this and so on. But I would like to have the community, not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Okay? This is essentially an endless struggle, and maybe my words are not comforting to a lot of people. They would like to have this thing, kind of over with, the struggle for civil rights. But let me remind everybody that we're over 50 years after the breakthrough legislation from Congress for civil rights when Lyndon Johnson, signed those legislation there. And look what happened last week. So, as our brothers and sisters in the African American community found out, it's a long way, it's a long struggle, and unfortunately, there's no way out of it. If you want to prove yourself there and stand for your rights, you have to work. You cannot just do it through talks. So, you'll find us again next year coming to you, asking for your help. So please don't get, bored or tired there, because again, that's the way life is. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, give us the strength to continue with this endeavor there for our rights, our civil rights. We ask our Creator, the Almighty, to show us the truth, the real truth, and veer us away from falsehoods. We ask our God, the Almighty, to help us be a beacon to not just to our community, but our society in general and to the whole world. Because, we don't believe that we're working only for our own community's sake, but for everybody's sake there. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. And I return the microphone back to.
Thank you. Alhamdulillah, we have raised $277,000 of our $300,000 goal. Please continue to give so that we can inch on up to our goal. And for me, Aisha El-Amin, from our ED Ahmed Rehab, our board chairman, Dr. Qudemi, and my fellow board members, Sister Suzanne Salud, Dr. Gloria Bashir, and Dr. Mohammed Shakiri. We thank you for joining us this evening and for your continued support of CAIR-Chicago. Have a good evening.